Chapter 185. Surprisingly, Yan Dan had held a private banquet to celebrate the victory of Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. Not many people attended the banquet, but all of them were the core ministers of Great Yan dynasty. The first reason for the celebration was the intelligence brought back by Wu Qi. Yan Dan did not take the loss of Qin army seriously, as the death of over 100,000 soldiers could not affect the strength of Qin dynasty. Therefore, Yan Dan did not take this army seriously either. What he valued the most was the intelligence brought back by Wu Qi regarding the Qin army. The cultivation technique cultivated by Yingzheng, the magical treasures owned by Yingzheng, and the various divine abilities and magical spells possessed by the generals and ministers of Qin army. This intelligence was the main reason why Yan Dan conferred the title of Duke to Wu Qi, and gave him 1/5 of the counties located at the southern bank of Huaiyang as his fief. Yingzheng knew nothing about the situation of all the generals and ministers of Great Yan dynasty, but Great Yan dynasty had already learned all kinds of information about him. In terms of strategy, Yingzheng was one step ahead. As for Lu Qingfeng's meritorious deed of wiping out 70,000 barbarians from Brotherhood of Mountains clan, and eradicating the Gao Ling kingdom who had colluded with barbarians, they were not bad in comparison. However, when compared with the meritorious deed of Wu Qi, they were somewhat overshadowed. Yan Dan only praised Lu Qingfeng a little, letting him secure the position of Zhuo, and that was all. After drinking for half the night, Yan Dan summoned all the ministers to discuss various countermeasures against Qin dynasty. As Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng did not have the status, they did not have the qualification to attend such a meeting. Therefore, they obediently returned to their mansion. However, Wu Qi was accompanied by 2 more men, Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin. These 2 brothers were the eldest and second uncle of Xiong Qing and his brothers. They possessed the cultivation base of nascent soul realm, and were low-grade spirit beasts who had awakened the unique bloodline of iron-boned bear of earth. Although they only possessed the cultivation base of early-stage nascent soul realm, they were strong enough to fight against ordinary mid-stage nascent soul human cultivators. They were the personal guards assigned by Yan Dan to Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng. It had been less than a year since Wu Qi came to Ji City, and he had offended many enemies. Some of them came out of nowhere, which made Yan Dan a little embarrassed. That was why he assigned Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin to Wu Qi. It was a quiet night. Wu Qi slept soundly in his own abode. Only then did he rise to his feet, and only then did he rise slowly. After that, Wu Qi, a few days, Wu Qi, washed and Wu. Who was, Wu? He had Zhang Palace, Yan, and Lu, who was. He. And had not. Wu Qi's Wu. And Lu. Wu Qi had. It had been a few months since he last saw Zhang Lu. Firstly, Wu Qi was afraid that Zhang Lu would flip out, and secondly, he was starting to miss her. Escorted by a group of demon bears and a large group of guards, right when Wu Qi arrived at the entrance of the Duke mansion, he saw Hai Yuntian, who was clad in a green outfit, sticking his head out and peering at them from across the street. Obviously, Hai Yuntian wanted to come closer to them, but he didn't have the courage to loiter in front of Duke Yan Li's mansion. Therefore, he squatted on the opposite side of the street. Wu Qi stared at Hai Yuntian with surprise, quickly waved his hand and said, Hai Yuntian, what are you doing over there? Didn't I tell you to look for me in Duke Yan Li's mansion if you need anything? Why don't you squat in the gatehouse and wait for me? Why are you standing there in a daze? Seeing that Wu Qi had recognized him, Hai Yuntian ran over excitedly. Without hesitation, he bowed at Wu Qi and said, Marquis, you're finally back. I've been looking for you a few times these days, but you're not around. Today is the last day of the Rare Treasures Conference, and that's why I'm here looking for you. The rules of the Duke Mansion are very strict, how could I dare to stand guard in there? Wu Qi smiled, patted on Hai Yuntian's shoulder and said, It's my fault. I've not been in Ji City for the past few days, and I've forgotten to tell them to explain to you. What is this Rare Treasures Conference? What does it mean by the last day? Hai Yuntian hurriedly smiled and said, This Rare Treasures Conference is an incredible event. You're a cultivator, and this Rare Treasures Conference is a conference that specializes in auctioning all kinds of rare and precious treasures that can be used by cultivators, and also some rare and precious items that we can't identify. It only happens once every 10 years, and each conference lasts for 1 month. Today is the last day, and it's also the best day to auction all kinds of rare and precious items. Wu Qi was startled, then he quickly asked Hai Yuntian for the details. Only now did he know that although there was a market of 4 seas in Ji City that sold all the rare and precious items under the heaven, it was mainly targeted at ordinary merchants and those itinerant cultivators who didn't belong to any sects or sections. There were many rare and precious items that were sold there, but the true supreme-grade rare and precious items could only be found in the Rare Treasures Conference that was held once every 10 years. In the Rare Treasures Conference, all the merchants, influential clans, immortal sects, and powerful cultivators of Great Yan Dynasty would participate in this conference that was held once every 10 years. Some rare and precious items that couldn't be found in the market of 4 seas would only appear in the Rare Treasures Conference. In the last Rare Treasures Conference, one of the most precious treasures was an acquired spirit pearl condensed from gold element energies. In the end, it was exchanged by the general of Great Yan Dynasty, Yue, with 30 cities as his fief. Wu Qi's eyes lit up. He already had the acquired spirit fire bead and the acquired water bead, and now he had another acquired spirit bead condensed from the gold element qi. Didn't the heavens want him to gather a set of acquired 5 elemental treasures? Had General Yue bought this acquired spirit pearl? Wu Qi immediately felt relieved. When he was free, he would pay a visit to Yuyi's house. It would be a waste to keep this precious pearl that was worth 30 cities in his hands. He hesitated for a brief moment, then Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "You do remember my words, don't forget to inform me when there's good news." "TSK, I was planning to visit Princess Xianglu, but it doesn't matter if I'm late by 1 day. Where is the Rare Treasures Conference? Quick, bring me there." Hai Yuntian quickly nodded and bowed. Wu Qi asked someone to prepare a mount for him, then he followed Hai Yuntian and rushed towards the venue of the Rare Treasures Conference. The Rare Treasures Conference was jointly organized by Great Yan Dynasty, 13 immortal Dao sects, various influential clans, and the largest merchant. The tax that was paid for this Rare Treasures Conference that was held once every 10 years was an astronomical figure. Naturally, a grand conference like this would not be held in a small space within Ji City. Instead, it would be held in a special venue. 80 miles away from the east gate of Ji City, surrounded by a few small mountains, there was an exquisite and beautiful lake. Right in the middle of the lake, a 3-storied platform made of white jade was built. This platform was the venue of the Rare Treasures Conference. Surrounding the lake, a great number of exquisite pavilions and houses were built halfway up the surrounding hills. These pavilions and houses could accommodate several tens of thousands of people, and were used for the distinguished guests of the Rare Treasures Conference to bid for the items. In every pavilion and house, there was a specially crafted formation that allowed the distinguished guests to have a clear look at the items being auctioned on the platform, and they could press the button on the formation to increase the price of the items. If the distinguished guests had any questions about the items being auctioned, they could even go up the platform and inspect the items. Cultivators could fly to the center of the lake on their own flying swords, while ordinary people could be fetched by ferries. Everything was very convenient. Along the way, Wu Qi and his company were listening to Hai Yuntian introducing all kinds of secrets and interesting news to them. Very soon, they arrived at the venue of the Rare Treasures Conference. After going through a series of strict inspection, Wu Qi was sent to a small mountain located on the east side of the lake. It was a distinguished guest house specially reserved for Duke Yan Li's mansion. The organizer of the Rare Treasures Conference was well informed. He knew about the relationship between Wu Qi, the newly promoted Duke of Tianyun, and Lu Qingfeng. Therefore, he directly sent Wu Qi to this lofty and luxuriously furnished abode, which had 3 floors and 3 buildings on the left and right. Standing on the highest floor of the abode, which measured several tens of feet in both width and length, and was covered with a thick carpet made of pure wool, one could overlook the white jade platform in the center of the lake. The small-scale formation used for the auction was hovering right in the middle of the terrace, and could move according to the will of the guests. On the outer shell of the small-scale formation, which was forged with purple gold, there were 5 buttons made from 5 colored crystals, representing the increment of 1,000 gold coins, 10,000 gold coins, 100,000 gold coins, 1,000,000 gold coins, and 10,000,000 gold coins respectively. If the owner of the treasure couldn't be decided even after the increment of 10,000,000 gold coins was raised, the guest could press a button made from a black crystal next to it, and contact the host of the auction directly. Then, the host could use an or vein, a city, or even a piece of land to trade for the treasure. Listening to Hai Yuntian introducing the rules of the auction and the value of those crystals, Wu Qi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat from his back. With his little wealth, what could he buy in this place? After glancing around for a while on the terrace, Wu Qi found out that all the pavilions around this abode belonged to those top-notch nobles of Great Yan Dynasty. On the left was the abode owned by Duke Yanxi, the right supervisor of Great Yan Dynasty. A little further up, on a hillside about 200 feet higher than Wu Qi's abode, was the abode owned by Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen. While listening to Hai Yuntian introducing the ownership of the abodes nearby, Wu Qi suddenly saw Princess Zhanglu walking slowly towards him, surrounded by a group of palace guards. She looked a little haggard. Surrounded by a group of palace guards, she was walking slowly towards him. Wu Qi was struck with great joy. Without hesitation, he sprung into the air, kicked the bamboo with the tip of his feet, and leaped towards Princess Zhanglu like a gust of wind. When he was still several hundred feet away from Princess Zhanglu and the people around her had raised their heads up. When they saw that it was Wu Qi, all the palace guards who were about to draw their blades stopped their attacks. Suddenly, a joyful look emerged on Princess Zhongli's haggard face, and a smile that she couldn't conceal emerged on her face. But in the blink of an eye, she clenched her jaws, stomped her feet, placed both hands on her waist, and stared at Wu Qi with her puffed nose and glared at him. She put on an expression that said, "I'm very angry, and you can do whatever you want to do to make me happy." Wu Qi chuckled and was about to greet Princess Zhanglu, but suddenly, a faint dragon roar was heard. Suddenly, a handsome young man came out from behind Princess Zhanglu. He was clad in a white battle robe embroidered with hundreds of patterns, a silver bone pishio crown on his head, and a pair of white rhinoceros leather boots. His face looked like a silver basin, his eyes bright like the stars, and his entire body was covered with a layer of snow white, so white that it was dazzling to look at. He thrust his spear towards Wu Qi's chest. The young man cried out sternly, "How dare you assassinate the princess of Great Yan Dynasty?" The silver spear moved like a bolt of lightning, measuring 18 feet long and as thick as a chicken. 9 tiny flood dragons were coiling around its surface, intertwining with each other. The tip of the spear was extremely sharp. A faintly discernible silver gleam shot out a few feet from the tip of the spear, accompanied by a whistling sound that made one's eardrums ache. Almost at the same time when the spear was thrust out, it had arrived before Wu Qi. The spear left a several hundred feet long silver beam in the air. The tip of the spear nearly pierced through Wu Qi's body, while the tail of the silver beam was still coiling in front of Princess Zhanglu. The eyes of the handsome young man who thrust out the spear were cold and gloomy. Together with the spear, he leaped and came before Wu Qi, thrusting both fists towards Wu Qi's body. One fist went straight towards Wu Qi's chest, while the other went straight into his dantian. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Wu Qi with a single strike. A spear and a pair of fists brought up a strong wind that shattered the surrounding bamboo forest. The long bamboo fibers darted across the sky, piercing through the air like arrows. Wu Qi retreated hastily, cursing furiously, "Where did this mad dog come from? How dare you bite me in broad daylight?" The silver spear and the pair of fists followed closely behind Wu Qi's body. "I'm Yu Su, the lineal grandson of Chief General Yu Yi. People call me Silver Flood Dragon. How dare you, assassin? Bow down and die now." Wu Qi's face turned cold. He snorted coldly and said, "Yu Yi's lineal grandson. Get lost now." Abruptly, Wu Qi's body fell backward, then he gave a powerful kick with his right leg. After being tempered in the depths of Meng Mountains, and having absorbed a part of Catfish Flood Dragon's blood essence, the strength of Wu Qi's fleshly body had gone far beyond Yusu's imagination. His movement was frighteningly fast, like an antelope hanging its horns, and without a trace, he thrust his leg out and smashed it viciously on Yusu's lower abdomen. A miserable howl rang out, and blood sprayed in all directions. Chapter 186. The sound of the blade piercing through the flesh was rather jarring to the ears. The silver spear had pierced through Wu Qi's left shoulder, causing blood to spray out from the tip of the spear and stain it with the color of blood. Wu Qi howled in pain, his right palm tightly gripping the silver spear in his left shoulder as he staggered back a long distance. Meanwhile, Yusu's lower abdomen was kicked by Wu Qi, and his dantian was cracked open by Wu Qi. Innate energies that nearly condensed into Jin Dan burst out from the cracks, and half of his cultivation base was crippled by Wu Qi's kick. He didn't even have the time to let out a snort, and a mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth. Then, like a scarecrow, he was sent flying more than 100 feet away, crushing several bamboos in a sorry state. His body rolled down the hillside where the bamboo forest was located. Princess Xianglu narrowed her eyes, revealing her two little canine teeth as she smiled happily. A dozen captains clad in silver battle robes strode out from behind Princess Xianglu, shouting at the top of their voices, "How dare you hurt our young master? How dare you?" Wu Qi tightly gripped the silver spear in his shoulder and cried out at the top of his voice, "Somebody! Assassins! Assassins! Kill all these assassins who dared to hurt me! Kill them, capture the culprit alive, and send him to the imperial palace to be punished." Two wild gusts of wind shot out from the abode behind. Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin were seen flying towards Wu Qi, bringing with them a billowing demon wind. Amidst the pitch-black demon wind, four huge bare paws, about 10 feet in circumference and glinting with a faint metallic luster, swooped down and crushed a dozen white-robed captains into meat patties while howling miserably. It was a real meat patty, one that did not contain even a single drop of blood. All the blood had been forced out of their bodies by the huge explosive force. The blood splashed hundreds of feet away, and only pieces of thin skin stuck to the ground. Everyone was staring at Wu Qi, who was screaming miserably, and Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin, who were covered in blood, with shocked eyes. After a long while, a middle-aged scholar clad in a white robe stepped out from behind Princess Xianglu, his body trembling. Pointing his finger at Wu Qi, he snapped, "How dare you? Our young master is the grandson of General Yusu. They are the family guards of the chief general." The golden bear rolled its eyes and let out a fierce roar towards the middle-aged scholar. He roared, "What bullshit, great general's grandson? We only saw that Duke of Tianyun, whom we were protecting under imperial orders, was assassinated and seriously injured by you. We are Swallow Cloud Pavilion's gold medal consecrators, Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin. We have a chance to fight this lawsuit. Xiong Qing, tie up these bastards for me." Xiong Qing and his brothers howled as they charged forward with a large bundle of rope tied with cow tendons. They bowed respectfully to Princess Xianglu, then grabbed the middle-aged scholar and gave him a brutal beating. After that, they tied him up like a rice dumpling with the rope. Even Yusu, who was knocked unconscious by Wu Qi's kick, was tied up tightly by a few big bears. Casually dragging the end of the rope, Xiong Qing and his brothers rode on a demon cloud and kicked up a demon wind, rushing towards the imperial palace of Great Yen. Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin stared coldly at the few young men who followed closely behind Princess Xianglu and said in a cold voice, "Duke of Tianyun is a duke conferred by His Majesty last night. Just now, that little rascal dared to injure Duke of Tianyun in public. Putting aside the dignity of His Majesty, we brothers cannot afford to lose that face. So what if he is Yu Yi's grandson? We, the Black Wind Valley of Meng Mountains, will not care about this little rascal." The few young men standing behind Princess Xianglu had their faces filled with anger, and they even had a strange gloating expression on their faces, as well as some other strange expressions. But, when they heard the roars of Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin, their faces fell instantly. Obviously, they were very afraid of the Black Wind Valley of Meng Mountains. They exchanged a glance, then Chi-Chi bowed his head and did not give Wu Qi another look. Wu Qi swayed and pulled out the silver spear from his shoulder. A few secret agents of scouting office quickly came over and applied some ointment on his wound, then tied it up tightly with bandages. Wu Qi kept screaming and grimacing in pain, his face turning blue. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that after he possessed the Dharma body of an earth immortal, it would be so painful when he tore his fleshly body apart with a mystic technique. It was as if several hundred heavy axes were chopping viciously on his shoulder. If not for the fact that he tore his fleshly body apart and created a wound on his shoulder that was twice the size of the silver spear, how could Yusu, who had yet to form his gold core and was only carrying an upper-grade magical spear, break his fleshly body? There were so many witnesses at the scene, and they all saw Yusu piercing his shoulder with the spear. Therefore, they decided to let him be the scapegoat. Weighing the 360-kilogram silver spear in his hand, Wu Qi sneered. Although the silver spear was only an upper-grade magical item, during the crafting process, it was obvious that some techniques of lower-grade magical treasures were used as reference. The silver spear felt cold to the touch, and once it was waved, it would shoot out a piercing cold air to hurt the enemy. If used in a battlefield, this silver spear had the magical effect of freezing the enemy in a large area. An upper-grade magical item like this could be considered as a rare and exquisite product, and it could fetch quite a high price in the market. Turning his head and nodding at Yen Bugue, who was following behind him, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Everyone has seen it. This is the weapon used by the assassin to kill me. Naturally, I have to confiscate it." Casually putting the silver spear into his storage ring, Wu Qi walked towards Princess Xianglu with a slightly messy pace, his entire body stained with blood. "Your Highness, Wu Qi returned to Ji City today. Initially, I was going to look for you in Garden of Xianglu outside the city, but when I heard that you are coming to the Rare Treasures Conference, I immediately came here and waited for you. I never expected that there would be such a ruthless assassin following Princess." Princess Xianglu frowned as she stared at the wound on Wu Qi's left shoulder. With a gloomy expression, she said, "That Yu Su is the grandson of Chief General Yu Yi. Recently, he has been pestering Zi Xian everywhere. I never expected that he is such a cruel and merciless man. By Zhuer, from now on, don't let Yu Su come near Garden of Xianglu and the Imperial Palace. If he dares to show his face, break his legs." Are you alright?" Princess Xianglu came next to Wu Qi, pulled his sleeve, and asked him with a fierce tone where he had been during the past few days. Wu Qi did not try to hide anything, and told her everything that had happened to him during the past few days. Apart from the fact that he had opened up a secret cave, he told Princess Xianglu everything, including how he tangled with the Qin army, and how he brought Wanying Dragon King to besiege the Qin army's campsite. He also told her how Lu Qingfeng plotted and annihilated an elite army of 70,000 soldiers from Brotherhood of Mountains clan, and how he wiped out the Gao Ling kingdom, which had colluded with the barbarians. Princess Xianglu was fascinated by the story. She had never left Ji City for her entire life, and when had she ever encountered something so exciting and thrilling? The enormous water system of Longyuan River, the magical flood dragons, the mighty Qin army, the legendary item of virtue, the universal water spirit's divine cauldron of Yu the Great, everything was so magical. Princess Zhongli's anger towards Wu Qi for not seeing her for a long time had completely vanished. She kept pulling Wu Qi's sleeve, and her body was almost pressed against Wu Qi's, while she kept asking, "What happened after that? What happened after that? Is that Yingzheng really so formidable?" And so on. The few young men who followed behind Princess Xianglu had their faces turned extremely unsightly. They exchanged glances, then turned to look at Wu Qi as if they were looking at their mortal enemies. Wu Qi could sense the malicious intent in their eyes. He turned his head and gave them a glance, then shook his head mockingly and casually threw a middle finger at them. With regards to this middle finger, Wu Qi had the intention of casting pearls before swine. These fellows simply did not understand the profound meaning contained in this middle finger. After walking side by side with Princess Xianglu for some distance, two secret agents of scouting office suddenly came over hastily and whispered a few words to him. Yan Bugui hesitated for a brief moment, then he followed behind them. He interrupted Wu Qi, who was describing catfish flood dragon's appearance to Princess Xianglu, and said in a low voice, Heaven-breaking sword sect's Grand Elder, Nia Yaonu, and sect leader, Nia Baihong, are here these days. Wu Qi was taken aback. He gave Princess Xianglu a look, smiled and held her little hand. Let's go meet my master and Grand Elder. Princess Xianglu narrowed her eyes, and the corners of her mouth curved upwards as she said, Let's go meet my elder sister and my nephew, the sect leader. Wu Qi's face twisted immediately, and he glared at Princess Xianglu grumpily. Under the guidance of the two secret agents, both of them brought a large group of men and quickly headed towards an abode located on the highest peak of a mountain on the west side of the venue. The small mountain on the west side was occupied by all 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty. The abodes on the mountain were arranged in picturesque disorder, and were owned by each of the sections. As Nia Yaonu was currently the strongest among all the human immortals of Jin Dan realm in all 13 immortal sects, and with just a single sword, she managed to obtain the position of the strongest in all 13 immortal sects. As a result, the abode of Heaven-breaking sword sect occupied the highest peak of the mountain. After the group of men had gone far away, a ball of soft white light suddenly emerged from the bamboo forest. Amidst the white light, Yu Wendi and Yu Qianqian revealed themselves. Yu Wendi looked at the bloodstains on the ground, shook his head and said, Silver Flood Dragon Yu Su is just so. He is not worthy of Princess Xianglu. Indifferently, Yu Qianqian said, What I'm concerned about is not who is worthy of Princess Xianglu. I just want to bring some unhappiness to her and Wu Qi. Yu Wendi knitted his brows into a tight frown, shook his head, sighed and said, After all, these petty schemes are just some unorthodox techniques. They are not worthy of the attention of everyone. If not because you are my only daughter, and I still need to rely on you to compete with the others in the future, I wouldn't allow you to do whatever you want in this matter. I won't allow you to meddle in this. Let's see what these young men can do. Yu Qianqian frowned slightly, then she smiled and said, Fine, I won't meddle in this matter. But, since he had severely wounded Yu Su with a kick, what would Yui think? Yu Su is the youngest grandson of Yu Yi, and also the youngest genius in the clan who could possibly form the Jin Dan realm. That kick from Wu Qi was very powerful. With an undisguised gloating expression, Yu Qianqian laughed complacently. Yu Wendi knitted his brows into a tight frown. He looked at his proud daughter, shook his head lightly and said, You've chosen the wrong person to stand out rashly. If it were the juniors of Qin Wuyang or Fan Yuqi, when Wu Qi severely wounded them, the two old men would jump out to protect him. However, Yu Yi is a talented general, calm and fair, with a magnanimous bearing. He will not meddle in the affairs of these little kids. Just you wait and see, Yu Su will be severely punished by Yu Yi, and Yu Yi will personally write a letter of apology to Duke of Tianyun. After that, this matter will be settled. Yu Qianqian opened her mouth, stared at Yu Wendi and said with a cold voice, Qianqian doesn't believe it. Yu Wendi gave his daughter an indifferent look, sneered, and said, You are still far from mature. You haven't made any progress after all these years. Looks like I'll have to think of a way to marry you off. Upon hearing what Yu Wendi said, Yu Qianqian's face fell instantly. At the same time, Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu had arrived at the abode owned by Heaven-breaking sword sect, where they formally paid their respects to Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong. After bowing to both of them attentively, Wu Qi smilingly came before them, handed over a palm-sized jade tablet. Grand Elder, Master, Disciple wants to exchange this jade tablet for the mystic technique of unity of sword energy script. He smiled at the astounded Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong, then hastily said, I can swear with my prime soul that this unity of sword energy script will be cultivated by me alone, and not a single word will come out from my mouth. Chapter 187. Both Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong were struck dumb by the fact that Wu Qi requested to learn the unity of sword energy script the moment they met. After sizing up Wu Qi for a long while, Yaonu smiled and said, Wu Qi, the unity of sword energy script is a supreme sword technique that can only be cultivated after one has condensed the Jin Dan. It is a technique that condenses the sword energies and sword beams found in the 5 elements sword technique, which contains all 5 elements, into the purest sword energies under the heaven, without any element. It is invincible, and invincible. With your current cultivation base, it is still too early for you to learn it. Nia Baihong's answer was even more straightforward. Apart from my mother and myself, no one in Heaven-Breaking Sword sect has learned the unity of sword energy script. Wu Qi, oh, Wu Qi, what is in this jade? Is it worth it for me to teach you the unity of sword energy script? Wu Qi looked at Niayaonu, smiled and said, Grand Elder, could it be that Wu Qi will never be able to condense the Jin Dan for the rest of his life? Master, if you want to develop and expand Heaven-Breaking Sword sect, do you really need this jade tablet? This jade tablet is the map of the dozens of energy stone veins and over 20 rare metal veins that I found in Meng Mountains. Those metal veins are the best materials for crafting magical treasures. Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong's faces fell instantly. They fixed their eyes on Wu Qi and asked in a deep voice, Are you serious? Wu Qi raised his right hand and said in a serious tone, I can swear a life oath. It's true. Both mother and son exchanged a glance. Then, Nia Yaonu said in a deep voice, After those mineral veins are excavated, I'll give you 50% of the profit. She pulled out a translucent jade slip from under her sleeve, then focused her mind and carved all the incantations of the unity of sword energies script on it. After that, she casually threw it over to Wu Qi. After that, she rolled up her sleeve and pulled the jade tablet from Wu Qi's hand into her palm. After that, she sent her divine sense into the jade tablet, and a joyful smile immediately emerged on her face. The map was so detailed that it showed the distribution of every tree near the mineral vein. If such a detailed map was forged, then it would take a lot of effort. Only when Wu Qi personally ventured into the depths of Meng Mountains, found these mineral veins, and used the mystic technique of crafting jade maps used by cultivators to enlarge the surrounding scenery, would he be able to obtain such a detailed map. Nia Yaonu nodded satisfyingly, then turned to Wu Qi and said, Memorize the unity of sword energy script now, then destroy the jade slip. Swear an oath that apart from you, no one is allowed to learn this mystic technique. She paused for a brief moment, then continued with a deep voice, In the future, if you want to recruit a disciple, after getting the permission from me, your disciple can learn this mystic technique. This is not within the scope of the oath. Gladly, Wu Qi merged all the mystic technique recorded in the jade slip into the depth of his soul, then crushed the jade slip with his finger. Without any hesitation, he immediately swore an extremely vicious oath. He did not play any tricks on the oath, and indeed, he would not let anyone learn this mystic technique. The power of this unity of sword energy script was extraordinary, and it was just right for him to use in front of others, using it to conceal the various spells he was cultivating from the scroll of stealing. Several tens of thousands of profound and subtle cultivation techniques were imprinted in his mind, and there were also 72 diagrams of circulation routes flashing across his mind. In just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi had memorized the mystic technique of unity of sword energy script. His insane intelligence began to analyze this technique, while the innate energies in the main meridians in his body began to circulate according to the circulation routes of this mystic technique. In these meridians, the innate energies, which were a few times denser than mercury, were rolling and twisting in his dantian while producing loud swooshing noises. Gradually, they condensed into the embryonic form of a Jin Dan. As long as he continued cultivating for another half a month, Wu Qi had the confidence to use the unity of sword energy script as the core technique, and form the so-called heaven-stealing false pill in his dantian. As for the so-called heaven-stealing false pill, this Jin Dan was a real Jin Dan. The reason why it was called a false pill was that this Jin Dan could be abandoned at any time. Even if it was thrown out of his body and exploded, it would not cause any harm to Wu Qi. The only function of this Jin Dan was to circulate some stolen cultivation techniques, using them to confuse the people. The real foundation of Wu Qi's cultivation was still the 10 Jin Dan in the 7 stealing heaven meridians in his arms. Although the Jin Dan in his dantian contained an enormous amount of innate energies, it was actually powered by the sword energies cultivated by heaven-breaking sword sect, which had nothing to do with the scroll of stealing. Only a tiny thread of Wu Qi's divine sense was fused into the Jin Dan, as most of the power of his soul was fused with the 10 innate Jin Dan. Sensing the transformation in his body, Wu Qi could not help but let out a joyful smile, and kept bowing to Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong. Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong were struck dumb when they heard the gurgling noises coming from Wu Qi's meridians, which sounded like a great river flowing and rocking. The mother and son exchanged a glance, and their opinion of Wu Qi grew even higher. There was no need to examine the condition inside Wu Qi's body. Just by listening to the gurgling noises of his innate energies, they could tell that his meridians were extremely wide and tough, and had been fully filled with innate energies. On top of that, the quality of his innate energies was excellent, or else, it would be impossible for them to produce such a sound. Perhaps, after Nie Baihong, heaven-breaking sword sect would have another formidable force. Nie Yaonu nodded her head happily, and began to make other plans. At this moment, a few gurgling noises were heard coming from the outside, as all the organizers of the Rare Treasures Conference flew down to the Jade Dais located in the center of the lake. Today was the last day of the Rare Treasures Conference. At the moment when the sun in the east had completely leaped out from the horizon, the conference officially began. Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu did not return to their own abode. Together with Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong, they stood on the balcony of heaven-breaking sword sect's abode, looking down at the Jade Dais located in the center of the lake. They saw a few old men clad in white clothes and wearing tall hats standing solemnly in the center of the Jade Dais. On top of the Jade Dais were nearly 100 cultivators, whose cultivation base was at least middle stage of Jin Dan realm, and the strongest one was a cultivator that Wu Qi could not see through. Nie Yaonu shook her head and said, "Hee, a few old fools from Myriad Dao Alliance are here. Look at those few men clad in light green long robes, they are the elders of Myriad Dao Alliance. Lord Heavenly Spirit is from Heavenly Spirit Sect, and he is the founding ancestral master of Heavenly Spirit Sect. Layman White Dawn is from White Dawn Temple, and he is the founding ancestral master of White Dawn Temple. The other three are not as important as them, but they are also formidable figures from Myriad Dao Alliance." Nie Yaonu turned to look at Wu Qi, smiled and said, "Wu Qi, perhaps you don't know the background of Myriad Dao Alliance?" Myriad Dao Alliance is... With a gloomy face, Wu Qi interrupted Nie Yaonu's words. He stared at Lord Heavenly Spirit, who was standing solemnly on the Jade Dais, and said with a cold grin, "I know what Myriad Dao Alliance is. Lord Heavenly Spirit is the founding ancestral master of Heavenly Spirit Sect. I heard that 2 of the 13 Jin Dan elders of Heavenly Spirit Sect who were executed by His Majesty are his great-grandsons?" Nie Yaonu smiled. Thoughtfully, she turned to look at Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin, who were standing closely behind Wu Qi. She nodded her head and said, "Yes, you are." Wu Qi smiled as well. He pointed his finger at Lord Heavenly Spirit and said to Princess Xianglu, "This old fool had sent his disciples and grand-disciples to Meng Mountains to hunt down Wu Qi. But in the end, they were all chopped into meat paste by a group of subordinates of Weining Dragon King. Wu Qi has a deep grudge against him. Princess, you have to be careful in the future." Princess Zhongli's face turned extremely unsightly. She stared at Lord Heavenly Spirit, nodded her head slowly and said, "Is that so? I understand now." Heavenly Spirit Sect, they colluded with Wei Merchant and conspired against the law, trying to rebel against their superiors. TSK, Great Yen Dynasty does not lack these few nascent soul patriarchs of Heavenly Spirit Sect. Princess Zhongli's words were filled with a murderous aura, which made even Nie Yaonu cast a sidelong glance at her. Nie Baihong narrowed his eyes and smiled. If Princess Xianglu really wanted to deal with Heavenly Spirit Sect, he would be more than happy to see it happen. While the crowd was sizing up the figures on the platform, a small uproar was suddenly heard coming from outside the abode of Heaven-breaking Sword Sect. Just now, when Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu came into the abode to pay their respects to Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong, those descendants of influential officials and young men of great Yan dynasty standing behind Princess Xianglu were stopped by Nia Yaonu's trusted disciples. Now, as the meeting was about to begin, and Princess Xianglu still had not come out, a few descendants of influential officials had begun to show their displeasure to Nia Yaonu's disciples. Wu Qi gave Nia Yaonu a look. Nia Yaonu's face had turned dark and gloomy. Then, Wu Qi turned to look at Princess Xianglu. Princess Xianglu frowned, twitched her little mouth, snorted coldly and said, "Why are these annoying fellows still outside? Chase them away, and for those who refuse to leave, break their legs and throw them down the mountain. Don't be afraid of death. Great Yan dynasty may not have many other things, but rascals like them are a dime a dozen. Killing a few of them will make things much quieter." Swaying his huge, pitch-black body, Xiong Yin walked down the stairs and came to the entrance of the abode. After a few loud slaps that shook the heaven and earth, a dead silence reigned in front of the abode. No one dared to make a sound anymore. Then, Xiong Yin walked up the stairs with his burly body, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and stood behind Wu Qi with a menacing look in his eyes. Princess Xianglu laughed. She frowned and said with a puzzled tone, "These people have been annoying for the past 2 days. After Zi Xian was injured last time, she had just recovered from her secluded cultivation half a month ago. Yu Qianqian brought them to Garden of Zhanglu for a banquet, and after that, they have been pestering Zi Xian. Especially that Yu Su, who was injured by your kick just now. Because he had just led an army and wiped out a vassal kingdom that had the intention of rebelling, he was praised by Grandpa, and was even conferred the title of Baron. No matter where Zi Xian goes, he would follow her. They are really annoying." Wu Qi nodded his head thoughtfully. Hastily, he comforted Princess Xianglu with a few words, then gave her the gifts he plundered from Catfish Flood Dragon. Princess Xianglu was beaming with joy, and had completely forgotten about Yu Su and the others. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was pondering in his mind, wondering what was the intention of Yu Qianqian by playing such a trick. He had a very bad impression of Yu Qianqian, as she was not a woman who could be liked openly. On top of the jade dais, the few old men clad in white robes and crowns were talking loudly. Their voices were strong and vigorous, and their voices could be heard echoing through the area of 10 miles in circumference. Even those who were standing in the abodes on top of the small mountains could hear every single word clearly. After some pleasantries, a few pretty maidservants came up to the jade dais, carrying a large box made of cold jade in their hands. Today was the 30th day of the Rare Treasures Conference, and also the last day. As such, there was no need to explain all the rules. The few maidservants opened the box, revealing 3 strange flowers, each about 1 foot in circumference and several thousand pure white and translucent petals. They showed the flowers to all the people in the abodes on top of the surrounding mountains, then hastily covered the box. An old man on top of the jade dais cried out with a loud voice, "The 1,000-petal snow flower is at least 3,000 years old. It can be used to concoct all kinds of spirit medicines that can cleanse one's spirit, exorcise evil spirits, and detoxify poison. The starting price is 200,000 gold coins or 200 pieces of lower-grade energy stones. Each increment must be no less than 10,000 gold coins or 10 pieces of lower-grade energy stones." All the people in the abodes had a profound cultivation base, so naturally, they had an excellent eyesight. Diagonally below Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, in an abode surrounded by green pines and cypresses, an old man's voice slowly rang out, "The 1,000-petal snow flower is a good item. Everyone present here is a knowledgeable expert. Let me throw out a brick to start the ball rolling. Give me a price first. 210,000 gold coins." Nia Yaonu twitched her lips, laughed mockingly and said, "Are these people from Valley of Medicine still so stingy? They want to buy these 3 rare treasures with such a small amount of money? Even if I have to bring them back and raise them in the lake, I can't let Valley of Medicine take them away so easily." She took a deep breath, then cried out with a stern voice, 1,000,000 gold coins. I've taken a fancy to these 3 flowers. Chapter 188. Wu Qi gazed at Nya Yaonu in shock. What she did was a malicious bidding. Heaven-breaking sword sect was famous for the sword, and apart from that, only the script of heaven-patching formation cultivated by Lu Qingfeng was the best in the Tao of formations. The thousand petals snow flower was completely useless to heaven-breaking sword sect. Therefore, by bidding a sky-high price, she was purposely picking a fight with Valley of Medicine. Inside the abode of Valley of Medicine, the old voice roared furiously, Nya Yaonu, what is the meaning of this? What is the use of the thousand petals snow flower to your heaven-breaking sword sect? 1,000,000 gold coins, 1,000,000 gold coins. If you want it, I'll give it to you. Nya Yaonu laughed out loud and said, Old Sanger, thank you for your generosity. Since you have said so, the thousand petals snow flower belongs to me now. Come, quickly bring me 3,000 petals snow flower. I'll pay for it on the spot. A dead silence reigned inside the abode of Valley of Medicine. No one made a sound. The old man on the platform said slowly, the Grand Elder of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, Nya Yaonu, bids 1,000,000 gold coins for 3,000 years old thousand petals snow flower. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? A beam of light shone from the platform, and a light screen emerged above the old man's head. A string of numbers appeared on the screen, 1,100,000 gold coins. It was unknown whether it was Valley of Medicine who made the bid again, or someone else had intervened, but this time, no one was stupid enough to bid. Instead, they bid the price using the small auction formation in a well-behaved manner. Apart from the organizer of the convention, no one would know who made the bid by using the auction formation. It could effectively prevent the malicious bidding by Nya Yaonu. Nya Yaonu laughed, then said with a cold voice with a gloomy face, I suppose it is Valley of Medicine who made the bid. Apart from them, no one else can use these flowers. Last time, Valley of Medicine sold us 3 bottles of soul-replenishing pills, which can heal the damage to the soul. There are 18 pills in 3 bottles, and they have blackmailed us for 1,800,000 gold coins. Each of these pills is almost equivalent to an upper-grade magical item. If I don't make them pay, who should I vent my anger to? She forcefully slapped on the auction formation with her right hand and increased the price by 1,000,000. The number on the screen changed once more, going from 1,000,000 gold to 1,000,000 gold. A few old men wearing tall hats showed bright smiles and shouted, 1,000,000 gold ingots. Is there anyone else who wants to make a bid? Is there anyone else who can offer a higher price than 1,000,000 gold? The number on the light screen changed again, going from 1,000,000 gold to 5,000,000 gold. Nya Yaonu sneered, clapped her palm again and increased the price by 1,000,000 gold coins. Inside the Medicine King's Valley's abode, a faintly discernible wave of magical power faintly spread out, and the number on the light curtain suddenly changed to 6,000,000 gold. Nya Yaonu pondered for a brief moment, then reached out her palm and was about to press the button once again. But this time, before she could press the button, the number on the light screen suddenly changed to 4,000,000 gold. A deep, angry roar was heard coming out from the abode of Valley of Medicine. Nya Yaonu was dumbfounded as she said, is this old hag being used by someone? As soon as he finished speaking, the number on the light screen changed to 5,000,000 gold, more than 20 times the base price. Nya Yaonu pondered for a brief moment, then shook her head and stopped bidding. She turned to Wu Qi and Princess Zhanglu, smiled and said in a low voice, 3,000 years old snow flower of 1,000 petals can be concocted into pills and sold according to the market price. The price they can get is only this much. I've made them lose all profits from this transaction, so even if I can vent my anger, I can't go too far. No one else bid, and Valley of Medicine easily obtained the ownership of the 3 rare flowers. After the incident of Nya Yaonu intervening in the auction, no one dared to bid for the following rare and precious spirit items. Instead, they all used the auction formation on their own balconies to bid for them. In this way, no one would know who was bidding, and no enemy would deliberately raise the price. The following dozens of items had all been auctioned at the price they deserved, and none of them had reached an insanely high price like the first item. Nia Yaonu no longer caused any trouble. Instead, she carefully and cautiously observed all the items being auctioned, and from them, she selected a few rare natural materials with decent quality and placed them in her hands. In Wu Qi's eyes, the quality of these materials was just average, and could not be considered as some precious natural treasures. He pulled Princess Xianglu aside, chatting and laughing in a low voice. Both of them had formed a small world of their own, and did not put any outsiders in their eyes. Time went by minute after minute. When 3.5 hours had passed, an old man on the jade dais suddenly cried out loudly, "Now, we are auctioning a total of 100 slaves from the Longbow Kingdom." The people of Longbow Kingdom are born with a lifespan of over 1,000 years, and those who have attained a certain level of cultivation base can live up to 10,000 years. These 100 slaves from the Longbow Kingdom are all elite warriors of the Longbow Kingdom. Even the weakest among them has the cultivation base of physique strengthening tier of Xiantian realm, and the strongest 10 slaves have the cultivation base of early stage embryonic breath realm. These are rare and precious items that can only be found by chance, and not by searching for them. Wu Qi's eyes went wide. Slaves from the Longbow Kingdom. The several tens of feet tall giants that once appeared next to Wei Xiaoxiao. The ones in the classic of mountains and seas, the culprit who could catch a gigantic turtle from the ocean with just a fishing rod, and left only the 3 islands of Penglai out of the 5 immortal mountains. The legendary gigantic creatures that could stand as tall as the heaven and earth. Longbow Kingdom people were also a kind of human beings, but they were favored by the heaven and earth, and possessed an enormous power. They almost never encountered any bottleneck in their cultivation, and as long as they kept cultivating step by step, each of them had the hope of becoming a heaven immortal. However, every time they advanced their cultivation base, they would encounter an extremely violent heaven immortal tribulation. If they could survive it, they would become immortal, and if they could not, their souls would be completely destroyed. Whether it was forming the Jin Dan or breaking the gold core to form the nascent soul, countless Longbow Kingdom people would be killed by the heaven tribulation. A Longbow Kingdom man who had attained the Mahayana realm of Jin Dan could fight against a human cultivator of nascent soul realm. A Longbow Kingdom man of nascent soul realm could fight against a human cultivator of nascent soul realm. A Longbow Kingdom man of heaven immortal realm could fight against a human cultivator of nascent soul realm and divine transformation realm. Wu Qi took a deep breath and rested his attention on the jade platform. The old man on top of the jade platform raised up a strange-shaped ring and said with a loud voice, "Apart from these 100 slaves of Longbow Kingdom, we will also auction this spirit-breeding ring. As long as the natural energy exists in the outside world, there is a small mustard seed immortal's cave in this ring, which is about 100 acres in circumference. These slaves of Longbow Kingdom can live and cultivate in this ring. 100 slaves of Longbow Kingdom that can be brought along with you. You can only bid with energy stones. The starting price is 10,000 pieces of middle-grade energy stones, and each increment must be no less than 100. The exchange rate between middle-grade energy stones and lower-grade energy stones was basically 1 to 100. The starting price for these 100 slaves of Longbow Kingdom was 1 million lower-grade energy stones. The price made Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong's faces fall. Although Heaven-Breaking Sword sect had enough of these slaves, it was controlled by Yanli, and the private money they had was far from enough to pay the starting price. Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly. He gave Princess Xianglu a look and said in a low voice, "I want these people. I am in need of a capable man." Wu Qi's foundation in this place was very shallow. Although he had some money and materials, he did not have a capable man. Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin were sent by Yen Dan to protect him, and they had nothing to do with him. Among these 100 slaves of Longbow Kingdom, 10 of them had cultivated to the realm of Jin Dan, and they were of great use to Wu Qi. He could train them a little, temper their fleshly bodies with herbs, and stimulate the ancestral bloodline of Longbow Kingdom in their bodies, allowing them to form a very powerful, heavenly 100 spirit warring formation found in Scroll of Stealing. With that, 100 Jin Dan warriors of Longbow Kingdom would be able to fight head-on against an existence who had just stepped into the realm of nascent soul and divine transformation. Once he had them, Wu Qi's ability to protect himself in this world would be greatly improved. Scroll of Stealing did not provide Wu Qi with all kinds of cultivation techniques that he could cultivate with. However, there were many unorthodox techniques that could stimulate the bloodline, stimulate the strength, and allow one to cultivate faster. When Wu Qi saw 100 longbow men standing on the shore, each standing over 100 feet tall, their bodies as white as snow, their hair silver green, and their eyes gleaming brightly and ferociously, he nearly drooled. When the old man on the jade platform announced the start of the bidding, Wu Qi immediately pressed the button on the auction formation, raising the starting price to 20,000 pieces of mid-grade energy stones. He did have some gains in Meng Mountains. All the belongings of 12 gold core cultivators and Su Fu, a peak-stage nascent soul expert, had been swept clean by him. To him, a mere 20,000 pieces of mid-grade energy stones was not a big sum of money. However, the number on the screen was changing rapidly, and in just a blink of an eye, it had risen to 50,000 mid-grade energy stones. It was obvious that these 100 slaves from Longbow Kingdom were very attractive. Not only Wu Qi had his eyes on them, but some other influential nobles and immortal sects had their eyes on these 100 slaves as well. With the ability of these powerful sects, they might not have the confidence to overcome the nascent soul tribulation, but they still had a 10 to 20% chance to help these longbow men survive the Jin Dan tribulation. Once they survived, they would have a dozen to 20 formidable slaves of Jin Dan realm, and the value of these slaves would be immeasurable. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi pressed the button a few more times, and the price of these slaves had soared to 150,000 pieces of mid-grade energy stones. At this point in time, those who were still bidding were probably the few wealthiest sects, such as Heavenly Spirit Sect and Valley of Medicine, who had earned a huge profit every year. The rest of the immortal sects had been frightened by the outrageous price and dared not to bid anymore. 150,000 mid-grade energy stones, this was the total amount of energy stones that Great Yen Dynasty could provide to an immortal sect for 30 years. Apart from Heavenly Spirit Sect, Valley of Medicine, and a few other wealthy sects, where else could the other sects have so many energy stones left? Even if they did, they dared not to take them out in public, as it would definitely arouse the suspicion of Great Yen Dynasty. Why are you hoarding so many energy stones in your sect? Are you trying to rebel? Wu Qi's eyes turned bloodshot. He used his divine sense to scan through the storage of energy stones in his storage ring, and was about to press the button and input the price of 300,000 mid-grade energy stones. However, Princess Zhanglu grabbed his hand. She glared at Wu Qi coquettishly, then said with a crisp voice, "I've taken a fancy to these slaves. Anyone who thinks his storage is richer than the storage of Great Yen Dynasty, just come and compete with me." With a light flick of her finger, Princess Zhanglu slowly pressed the black button, and with her voice, she input the price of another 150,000 mid-grade energy stones. A dead silence reigned the auction hall. No one made a sound. Just like that, 100 longbow slaves fell into the hands of Princess Zhanglu. Sticking out her tongue, Princess Zhanglu lowered her voice and whispered, "I've used up all my power. In a place like the Rare Treasures Conference, it is enough for me to show off my power once. If there are any more good things, those old fools will never let me have them." She smiled shyly, then lowered her head and said, 10 years ago, after I bought a 9,000 years old fire ginseng essence with 3 copper coins, Grandpa Emperor made a rule that I can only make a forceful bid like this once in every Rare Treasures Conference. 3 copper coins, a 9,000 years old fire ginseng essence. Wu Qi, too, turned to look at Princess Zhanglu in surprise, cursing in his mind, compared to her, you are the real thief. Not long after that, the host of the auction brought up the spirit breeding ring, and all 100 longbow men were placed into it. Wu Qi dripped a drop of blood onto the surface of the ring, then injected a thread of divine sense into it. He immediately sensed that all 100 souls were completely controlled by his divine sense, and with just a thought, he could wipe out all 100 souls. 100 powerful slaves were now in his hands. Chapter 189. After that, Wu Qi began to bid in all directions. In just 2 hours, he had auctioned over 20 items, all of which were exotic flowers and herbs. He had used all his strength to compete with Valley of Medicine, and spared no cost. He had spent all the energy stones in his storage ring and bought all these exotic flowers and herbs. Of course, Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong were pleased that Valley of Medicine had humiliated them, and the way they looked at Wu Qi had become much kinder. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was laughing wildly in his mind. With these exotic flowers and herbs, he could gather the main ingredients of the Ancestral Awakening and Body Tempering Soup, with 2 different prescriptions. As the name suggested, the Ancestral Awakening and Body Tempering Soup could purify one's blood essence, temper the fleshly body, and obtain the strongest power of their ancestors' bloodline. After consuming this soup, the people of Longbow Kingdom would have a chance to strengthen their fleshly body, purify their blood essence, and obtain the bloodline of their ancestors. According to the legends, the ancestors of Longbow Kingdom people were a race of deities in the ancient times. Longbow Kingdom people were the descendants of deities. The reason why their thunder tribulations of Jin Dan, nascent soul, and divinity were so severe was because their innate bloodline was too strong, and even the heaven was jealous of them. Therefore, such a powerful thunder tribulation was sent down. As long as they could stimulate even a tiny bit of the blood essence of an ancient deity, these 100 Longbow Kingdom people would be able to grow stronger quickly, and become the best helpers for Wu Qi. As all the main ingredients had been auctioned, with the help of some common spirit herbs, the concoction of the Ancestral Awakening and Body Tempering Soup could begin. After a fierce round of auctioning, the price of these exotic flowers and herbs had skyrocketed by dozens of times. Although Wu Qi did not participate in the auction for the next few spirit herbs, the people of Valley of Medicine had been panicking because of him. They had tried their best to buy these spirit herbs at a sky-high price, but in the end, they had wasted a huge amount of energy stones. This made Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong laugh out loud, and their fondness for Wu Qi grew. Time went by, and in the afternoon, a group of fully armed elite soldiers walked onto the platform. Each of them had the cultivation base of peak Jin Dan realm. These soldiers were clad in blood-red armors. Obviously, they were the captains of the most elite army of Great Yen Dynasty, the Blood Swallow Army. Among them, 10 armored soldiers were leading them, each possessing the cultivation base of nascent soul realm. The enormous ripples of energy emanating from them shocked even Wu Qi. The closer he got to the core of power of Great Yen Dynasty, the more things he knew, and the more Wu Qi felt that the overall strength of Great Yen Dynasty was unfathomable. Perhaps, when compared to Daqin Dynasty, Great Yan's overall strength was not much weaker. It was just that the cultivation base of Yen Dan and his men was not as strong as Yingzheng. Judging from their potential forces in other aspects, they were on par with the performance of Daqin Dynasty. Protected by so many human immortals and earth immortals, a translucent cold jade box was placed on the jade platform. Inside it were 5 pearls the size of a human head, 2 yellow and 3 green. As soon as he saw these beads, Wu Qi jumped up. The 2 yellow pearls were condensed from acquired earth element energy, and the 3 cyan pearls were condensed from acquired wood element energy. A total of 5 acquired spirit pearls appeared right before Wu Qi's eyes. The old man who presided over the auction on the jade platform stroked his beard and smiled reservedly. He laughed and said, "My honorable guests, since an acquired spirit gold pearl was bought by Chief General Yue at the price of 30 cities 10 years ago, a few largest merchants of Great Yen Dynasty had sent out a great number of men to search all over the world. Over the past 10 years, after sacrificing several thousand men in 5 extremely dangerous spirit caves, we finally found 5 acquired spirit pearls." Gently stroking the acquired spirit pearls in the box, the old man breathed out a long sigh and said, "I don't need to explain the benefits of these acquired spirit pearls. In short, as long as one is cultivating with a cultivation technique that corresponds to the 5 elements, after refining it into one's body, it will be able to help one's cultivation speed increase. After refining it into a natal magical treasure, its power will be limitless. If you place it in your mansion, together with an energy-gathering formation, you will be able to construct a natural spirit cave for your family members to cultivate in. Gently stroking the spirit pearls, the old man said in a deep voice, according to the price 10 years ago, the starting price of these 5 acquired spirit pearls is 10 cities, and they must be cities with a population of over 300,000 people. There is no upper limit. Please bid for the first spirit pearl of earth element. Without saying a word, Wu Qi slammed his fist heavily onto the auction formation, raising the price to the sky-high price of 40 cities. Currently, the fief under his name was 1/5 of a province, and there were several hundred cities of different sizes in it. He did not care about the loss of these dozens of cities. The acquired spirit pearl was kept in Yu Yi's mansion, and Wu Qi had a great confidence in stealing it. With the addition of 1 acquired spirit pearl of earth element and 1 acquired spirit pearl of wood element, Wu Qi would be able to gather all 5 acquired spirit pearls. Then, following the 7 foundation establishment technique found in Scroll of Stealing, he would construct a minor acquired spirit formation of 5 elements in his dantian. From then on, the spirit energy in his body would be regenerated, and the speed of his cultivation would definitely be much faster. Jin Dan had all 5 elements in his body, and by cultivating the unity of sword energy script, the power of his sword energy would be at least 10 times stronger than Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong, who did not have all 5 elements. The sky-high price of 40 cities had shocked everyone. 10 years ago, when Yui bought the acquired spirit pearl, it was only 30 cities. For a moment, the crowd was rendered speechless by Wu Qi. When the old man announced that the spirit pearl of earth element was now Wu Qi's property, whispers were heard coming from all the abodes, as if they were discussing which prodigal son had spent such a huge price to buy this spirit pearl. The first spirit pearl of earth element was bought by Wu Qi with a sky-high price, and the second spirit pearl of earth element had attracted even more people's attention. Among the 13 immortal sects of Great Yen Dynasty, there were 2 sects, Yellow Essence Sect and Indestructible Sect. Both of them were cultivating with earth element techniques. Yellow Essence Sect was an expert in earth element techniques, as they could move mountains and drop rocks from the sky. Their Dao techniques were very powerful. As for Indestructible Sect, they cultivated the indestructible body of earth, using the energies of the earth to temper their fleshly body, giving them a very strong fleshly body. On top of that, they were able to cast the divine thunder of earth, and the power of their thunder technique was also very powerful. Both sects had exerted all their strength to fight for this spirit pearl of earth element. Under the urging of their seniors, their disciples had offered up 1 or 2 cities of their fief, gathering together to bid for the second spirit pearl of earth. However, those disciples from influential clans who had joined the immortal sects to cultivate didn't have any achievements, and neither did they have any large fief. In the end, it was the Indestructible Sect who bought the second spirit pearl of earth element with the price of 47 cities. After that, it was the auction of the spirit pearl of earth element. The first spirit pearl of earth element was not very exciting. With 3 spirit pearls of earth element being auctioned, the crowd had no interest in bidding for it. Wu Qi clenched his jaws, once again offered the price of 40 cities and bought the second spirit pearl. When the host of the auction brought the 2 spirit pearls into Wu Qi's abode, he did not try to conceal it. Right in front of everyone, he fused the 2 acquired spirit pearls into his body and fused them into his dantian. Nia Yaonu and Nia Baihong could not help but nod their heads silently. With these 2 acquired spirit pearls, Wu Qi's cultivation speed would definitely surpass those people of the same age as him. Under the powerful effect of these 2 acquired spirit pearls, all those geniuses and innate talents would be nothing. However, both Nia Yaonu and her son were very poor, and they did not own any cities or fief that they could squander. Therefore, they could only stare at the spirit pearls, and could never get them. Meanwhile, Princess Zhanglu was looking at Wu Qi with a smile on her face. Wu Qi's generous spending of 80 cities in exchange for 2 acquired spirit pearls had made Princess Zhanglu feel refreshed and happy. Compared to Wu Qi's generous spending of tens of cities in one go, those sons of influential clans who had been pestering her these days, spending all their efforts to hold some luxurious banquets just to please her, were really not worth a single penny. Wu Qi saw a trace of envy flash across the eyes of Nie Yaonu and Nie Baihong, especially in Nie Baihong's eyes, which were filled with a faint trace of expectation. He also noticed that the strongest spirit root in Nie Baihong's body happened to be of wood element. Without hesitation, he pressed a series of buttons on the auction formation, and bought the second wood spirit pearl with the frightening price of 51 cities. When the host of the auction brought the acquired spirit pearl into his abode, Wu Qi held it up with both hands and presented it to Nie Baihong respectfully. Nie Baihong hesitated and felt too embarrassed to accept the acquired spirit pearl, but Nie Yaonu was more open-minded than him. She took the acquired spirit pearl and shoved it into Nie Baihong's hand, smiled faintly and said, "Don't act like a little girl. You can just accept the gift from your own disciple. In the future, if Wu Qi runs into any trouble in Ji City, as his master, just don't stay idle." Nie Baihong let out a long laugh. Without hesitation, he grabbed the wood spirit pearl, refined it with the true flame of samadhi, and fused it into his dantian. Different from Wu Qi, after fusing the wood spirit pearl into his dantian, Nie Baihong quickly made his gold core and the wood spirit pearl resonate with each other, breathing in and out their gold core and energies, gradually fusing them into one. He had taken the wood spirit pearl as his prime magical treasure and refined it. Once he succeeded in fusing it, this spirit pearl that was extremely compatible with his bone structure would allow Nie Baihong to unleash a lethality that was a few times stronger than before. The result was just as Wu Qi had expected. A bloody competition broke out for the third wood spirit pearl. The Valley of Medicine and the Green Spirit sect, a sect that cultivated the same wood element cultivation technique, fought crazily for the last wood spirit pearl. The two sides increased the stakes bit by bit, and finally, Medicine King's Valley relied on the advantage of having more children of influential families among their disciples to pool together 83 cities as fiefdoms, taking this spirit wood bead as their own. Many cultivators from the Green Spirit sect who failed in the competition flew into a rage. Accompanied by a wave of crazy curses, the abode where they stayed was shattered into pieces. A couple dozens of green beams soared into the sky, returning to their sect in a flash. Upon seeing this, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head and sneer. 83 cities, the disciples from influential clans from both sects could only gather 83 cities as their fief. This number was really not enough. However, when he thought about it, the disciples from influential clans were after all, the disciples from influential clans. It was fine if they were given the income of 1 or 2 cities as pocket money, but it was impossible for them to have the complete dominion over the cities. Therefore, the several thousand disciples from influential clans from both sects were only able to gather 80 cities as their fief. This made Wu Qi look down on them. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Princess Zhanglu, the auction had entered into its final phase. For the past 10 years, the organizers of the Rare Treasures Conference were unable to identify them, but they knew they must be some kind of rare and precious objects, would be put up for auction. Regardless of the final price they had to pay for these unidentifiable objects, the organizer would request the auctioneer to reveal the details of these objects to the public, so as to increase the knowledge of the people. This was also one of the conditions of the auction, so that they would not be embarrassed if they saw a treasure in the future and still couldn't identify it. Wu Qi looked at the jade platform in the center of the lake with great interest, wanting to see if there were any rare and precious objects that would be put up for auction. In the end, the first object nearly made him jump out to kill someone and rob their wealth. Chapter 190. For tall and burly human immortals of Jin Dan sect from Indestructible's sect were panting as they carried a 3 feet long and wide yellow jade box up to the platform. The cultivation technique cultivated by Indestructible's sect specialized in tempering the corporeal body. As a result, the strength of their fleshly body was unparalleled among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yen Dynasty. The fleshly body of any human immortal of Jin Dan sect from Indestructible sect was at least 100 times stronger than the other Jin Dan sect's human immortals. With just a wave of their arms, they could exert a brute force of several hundreds of thousands of kilograms. For human immortals of Jin Dan sect from Indestructible sect were actually working together to carry a yellow jade box, and yet, it was such a strenuous task. Whispers of discussion could be heard coming from all over the abodes. Many people were curiously asking about the item inside the box with loud voices. The old man who hosted the auction gave a few loud laughs, pretending to be mysterious as he stood right next to the box, bragging about how difficult it was to obtain the treasure in the box, and how for the sake of this treasure, over 1,000 men from 2 major merchant alliances were killed. Only then was it finally retrieved from the underground abyss. Amidst the urging voices that kept coming out from the surrounding abodes, the old man slowly opened the lid of the box, revealing a clump of something that looked like a cloud of mist, sand, and dust, and was wheeling and wheeling rapidly around a tiny yellow speck. When the clump of yellow mist was wheeling and dancing in the air, it produced deep, muffled noises of piercing through the air, as if countless meteors were falling from the sky. Wu Qi rose to his feet, forcibly restraining the impulse of rushing out and snatching the treasure. Since these fools could recognize the acquired pearl of earth element, how could they not recognize an innate spirit item like this? This was not a treasure that had taken shape, but a clump of innate earth element energy essence that was still brewing. The tiny bright speck in the middle of this clump of energy essence should be some innate spirit item, or even the embryo of an innate spirit life form. Those fog-like objects that were wheeling and wheeling around it were the pure and flawless innate earth element energy essence. Even a dust-sized innate earth element energy essence weighed over 1,000 kilograms, and this fist-sized clump of innate earth element energy essence weighed at least 2 to 3 million kilograms. No wonder it took 4 Jin Dan human immortals from indestructible sect to lift them up. The old auctioneer sighed helplessly and said, "This item is as heavy as a mountain. It can't be penetrated by water or fire, and can't be penetrated by spiritual sense. It doesn't seem to have any other function except that it's extremely heavy." Magic power could not be controlled, and no spells could destroy it. He did not know where it came from. Today, its starting bid is 1 copper coin. I invite those who know about treasures to bid. It was quiet all around, and no one made a sound. Everyone was trying to figure out what it was. Wu Qi stared coldly at the hosts of the Rare Treasures Conference on the Jade platform, and he sneered in his heart. The base price is 1 copper coin. It might seem generous, but they had lost over 1,000 men just for the sake of this clump of earth element energy essence. The cost of their lives should be much more than this, right? But too bad, just like Nya Yaonu and her son, they could only recognize the acquired treasures, but not the innate treasures. In order to refine the essence of the fifth earth, one would have to utilize the innate energy. On top of that, the embryo of a spirit item had already been formed inside of it, which made the difficulty of refining it even greater. Without the help of an innate flame, such as the divine flame of order, one would have to possess the cultivation base of at least gold immortal to be able to refine this innate energy that had already formed its own sentience and began to form its spirit embryo. The item was sold for 100 gold coins without much effort, and Wu Qi had raised the price for the first time. After a brief moment of silence, the price was raised to 200 gold coins hesitantly. For these influential and wealthy people of Great Yan Dynasty, it was very rare for them to be so cautious when bidding in the Rare Treasures Conference. Wu Qi remained silent for a while, then he pressed the black button and raised the price to 250 gold coins to the old auctioneer. After that, 300 gold coins, 350 gold coins, 400 gold coins, 500 gold coins, 800 gold coins. Amidst the fierce competition between Wu Qi and the unknown bidder, the price of this clump of innate earth element energy essence skyrocketed. In just a blink of an eye, it had reached 10 million gold coins. When Wu Qi raised the price to 10 million gold coins, he could not help but look around in shock. Could it be that apart from him, there was someone else who knew this clump of innate spirit item? The bidder who was bidding against Wu Qi immediately changed the price, from 10 million gold coins to 10 million gold coins and 20,000 pieces of middle-grade energy stones. Upon looking at the price of energy stones, Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. Needless to say, the bidder must know this innate spirit item, and he must be a cultivator. If it were an ordinary person, how could he be willing to spend a huge amount of gold coins and energy stones to purchase an item with unknown usage? Grinning coldly, Wu Qi pressed the black button once again and raised the price of a fief city. This time, the bidder did not raise the price, as if he was shocked by the price of a fief city. The host of the auction raised both of his hands excitedly and said, "A fief city, 10 million gold coins and 20,000 middle-grade energy stones. Is there anyone who can offer a higher price?" After asking for 3 times and making sure that no one could raise the price again, the host let out a loud laugh and said, "The one who bought this unknown treasure is Duke Wuqi of Great Yan's Duke of Tianyun. Duke Wuqi, please come up to the platform and explain to us what kind of treasure this is." Princess Xianglu smiled. She grabbed Wuqi up, stepped on a dark cloud, and flew up from the balcony amidst streaks of lightning, landing gracefully on it. She tilted her head up proudly, looking like a little phoenix who was showing off her beautiful and long feathers. She was feeling very proud in her heart. None of these people could recognize this treasure, and yet, Wuqi still managed to buy it with a sky-high price. Clearly, he must know what this treasure was. In other words, Wuqi's knowledge was much broader than all the people here, and this had made Princess Xianglu feel very honored. Looking at Princess Xianglu, who had a 5-colored divine ray shrouding her back, dark clouds rolling and rocking under her feet, and electric arcs flashing around her body, all the people on the platform frowned. They bowed to her according to the rules, then took a few steps back. Even Lord Heavenly Spirit, who hated Wuqi to the core, was frowning when he saw Princess Xianglu. His expression was filled with fear. Princess Xiangli's despotic power in Ji City had indeed reached a stage where even the gods and ghosts would avoid her. With her head held high, Princess Xianglu walked proudly to the yellow jade box. She gave the innate earth element energy essence a glance, then smilingly turned to Wuqi and said, "Wuqi, tell me quickly, what is this thing? I've never seen such a strange thing before, and it can't even be found in the treasure vault of the Imperial Palace." The treasure vault of the Imperial Palace contains all kinds of treasures, but I've never seen something that can't even be penetrated by divine sense. With a smile on his face, Wuqi walked to the yellow jade box, casually placed the clump of innate earth element energy essence into his storage ring. After that, he patted on his chest, cupped his fist at the surrounding abodes and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Wuqi, I'm sorry for making a fool of myself. This clump of insignificant object may look insignificant, but in fact, it is an extraordinary acquired earth element treasure, the 6th earth essence core. It is the crystallization of highly concentrated acquired earth element energy essence, and is at least 100 times denser than the earth pearl of heavenly spirit." Wuqi took a deep breath, and with a straight face, he continued to come up with a series of lies. As long as the earth core essence is fused into a magical treasure, once the treasure is unleashed, it will be as powerful as a great mountain. Even a nascent soul senior will have his fleshly body ripped apart and die. If it is crafted into an armor, its defensive strength will be even more amazing. At this point, Wuqi looked at the storage ring on his finger with a guilty conscience. The appearance of the 6th earth essence core was similar to the innate earth element energy essence, but the level of preciousness was like the difference between heaven and earth. The host of the convention asked hastily, "In that case, this is an extraordinary treasure that is hard to come by. But, how are we going to craft it? We've once invited 18 top-notch grandmaster craftsmen of Great Yan Dynasty to join hands, but none of them could even touch it. How are we going to craft such a strong material?" An enigmatic smile appeared on Wuqi's face as he nodded his head and said, "5 elements restrict each other." The host nodded his head thoughtfully and said, "Wood restricts earth element. Don't tell me we need to use an acquired wood element treasure to restrain it." Wuqi kept praising, "You are indeed the host of the Rare Treasures Conference. That is the reason. By soaking it with the spirit liquid condensed from acquired wood element energy, the nature of this 6th earth essence core will be transformed, turning it from a tempered steel into a soft and pliable material. With that, we can craft it easily." Then, he circulated his energy and blood with his energy, making his face blush slightly. With shame, Wuqi cupped his fist and apologized to the few hosts of the Rare Treasures Conference. "This is an extraordinary treasure that is hard to come by. In the end, I, Wuqi, have only paid such a small price for it. I'm truly ashamed, truly ashamed." Wu Qi behaved like a simple and honest young man who had just taken a great advantage of something. The few old men quickly returned the gesture and said, "We don't dare, we don't dare. Duke Wu Qi has broadened our horizons. In the future, when we see this treasure again, we won't let it be covered in dust. We have to thank Duke Wu Qi for clearing up the doubts in our minds." Wu Qi just smiled and did not say a word. Just like what these old men had said, it was a waste to keep these treasures that they could not identify. Therefore, it was better to auction them off. Not only could they earn some profits, they could also broaden their horizons, so that when they saw the same treasures again in the future, they would have a better idea. Ever since the founding of Great Yan Dynasty, the Rare Treasures Conference had been held again and again. As they were doing a long-term business, they did not care about the loss of a single treasure. Both parties laughed, then Wu Qi paid the price of the auction on the spot. The old man smiled, cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi, "But, we would like to ask, how did Duke Wu Qi learn about the origin of this treasure? 6th Earth Essence Core, we've never heard of such an extraordinary treasure before." Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then nodded his head and said, "When I was cultivating with my master in Meng Mountains, Wu Qi found a stone tablet in a barbarian tribe, and recorded on it are the characteristics and usages of several dozens of extraordinary treasures." Looking at these old men, Wu Qi smiled and said, "I suppose this is part of the inheritance of the barbarian ancestors. If any of you are interested, Wu Qi can sell this record of extraordinary treasures to the Rare Treasures Conference." The scroll of stealing had described the characteristics, usages, and origins of several tens of thousands of rare and extraordinary treasures under the heaven. Wu Qi had made a copy of the record of extraordinary treasures and threw it to the Rare Treasures Conference. It would be the best if he could extort some money from them. The few old men rolled their eyes. Obviously, they were tempted. Right when they were calculating the value of this record of strange items together with Wu Qi, a cold, mocking laugh was suddenly heard coming from one of the abodes. "Young lad, you have eyes but failed to see. How could you mistake this innate spirit item as an acquired treasure? This is like casting pearls before swine. Why don't you just give it to me?" The surrounding ground trembled slightly, and the natural energies stirred abruptly. In the next moment, a man appeared right in front of Wu Qi. Not allowing Wu Qi to say anything, the man, whose entire body was shrouded in a black cloak, stretched out his hand and grabbed towards Wu Qi. When he did that, a loud rumble came from all the surrounding hills, and a large sheet of yellow mist sprayed out from them. It was as if several dozens of great mountains were smashing down from above. An enormous magnetic force came sweeping over along with a jarring whistle. The jade dais in the center of the lake disintegrated immediately, while the few old men who hosted the conference were squeezed and shredded into a meat paste by the frightening distance while howling miserably. Lord Heavenly Spirit, Layman White Clouds, and the other 3 Earth Immortals who were responsible for guarding the conference cried out in alarm at the same time. When the man grabbed down, they staggered back like duckweeds in the wind, and their bodies were thrown high up into the sky by the tremendous magnetic force. Then, a hoarse voice was heard coming from the abode just now, "Help! Someone is trying to kill me. I don't know that man, but he was forcing me to bid just now." The surrounding abodes were thrown into chaos. From the abodes of the 13 immortal Tao sects, beams of blinding light shot out. Chapter 191. The energies from the underground energy veins, the energies from the surrounding mountains and rivers, the water vapor from the lakes, the driving force from the few small rivers and streams, and the gentle breeze blowing from the surrounding woods. With a single grab, all the natural energies in the surroundings were transformed into a tremendous magnetic force and smashed down from the sky. Apart from this extremely pure magnetic force, which was like a great python strangling its prey, with the jade platform in the center of the lake as its core, there were no other energies. 2 balls of green ghost flames burst out from the eyes of the black-robed man. He stared fixedly at Wu Qi, sneered, and said, "Hand over the innate earth element energy essence, and the black dragon spirit ring that belongs to my emperor, and I can still capture you alive and hand you over to my emperor. If you refuse, I'll crush your fleshly body, and leave behind your soul for my emperor." That's not a bad deal. A flame of spirit flame flickered in Wuqi's heart. With one swift move, he wrapped his arms around Princess Zhongli's slender waist and leaped backward. Using all his strength, he cried out sternly, "Somebody, help me." This man is a subordinate of Yingzheng, the emperor of Qin dynasty, a spy from Daqin dynasty. He has sneaked into Great Yan dynasty. His voice rang out like a thunderclap, and in a blink of an eye, it spread to several dozens of miles in circumference. In just a blink of an eye, several dozens of divine senses came rushing over from all directions of Ji City. Among them, a few divine senses even brought with them a towering rage, and a murderous aura as they came smashing viciously toward Wuqi like shooting stars, slamming forcefully into the protective barrier formed by the black-robed man's magnetic force. A few loud booms rang out, as two invisible and colorless forces collided with each other in midair, creating a few huge, translucent vortexes that could be seen with naked eyes. The huge vortexes spun rapidly in midair, and two small hills next to the lake flew up and were pulled into the vortexes. A series of noises that sounded like someone was chewing beans could be heard, as the two hills were crushed into powder, turning into earthy yellow earth energy and fusing with the magnetic force. The black-robed man shook his head, sneered, and said, "You're courting death." Accompanied by an eerie, cold laugh, the magnetic force suddenly changed, transforming into a gigantic web that covered the ground within a circumference of 30 miles. A loud boom rang out, and everything within a circumference of 30 miles was completely annihilated. Whether it was the mountains, the ground, the lakes, the rivers, the flowers, the trees, or even the ordinary guards and servants who were patrolling the Rare Treasures Conference, everything was crushed into the tiniest particles by the magnetic force. The energies contained in all objects were forcibly extracted by a strange and evil force, turning into magnetic force, which increased the magnetic force within 30 miles by a few times. The auction venue of the Rare Treasures Conference had now sunk into a huge pit that was tens of miles deep. The walls of the pit were as smooth as a mirror, without any burrs. Wherever the geocentric magnetic force enveloped, even the dust would be turned into nothingness by the tremendous force. All of the force had fused into this gigantic magnetic force shield. Apart from Wuqi, who was holding Princess Zhonglu in his arms, only those people who had rushed out from the abodes were still hovering in midair. Their bodies were controlled by the tremendous magnetic force, and they were like flies trapped in amber, unable to move at all. Wuqi was struck with great astonishment. This man's cultivation base was unfathomable, and the cultivation technique he cultivated was even more bizarre. No matter what kind of energy fell into his hands, it would be turned into magnetic force to attack his enemies. It was just like a small black hole that could devour everything, then turn all the energy into the magnetic force under his control. A cultivation base like this, and a cultivation technique like this man was simply an abnormal existence. Wuqi forced himself to turn his head and give Princess Zhonglu a glance, and he saw that Princess Zhonglu had turned her head and looked at him as well. Miraculously, both of them did not talk to each other, but when their gazes met, they understood each other's thoughts. With a light flick of his finger, he fished out 9 extremely powerful talismans from his storage ring, great crimson heaven dark gold flame and thunder talismans, which were made with a secret technique of heavenly spirit sect. They were all the talismans he had obtained after killing so many human immortals of heavenly spirit sect. The power of these talismans was equal to the full force strike of a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator. With a flick of his finger, a drop of blood essence sprayed out from his fingertip and fell onto the 9 golden talismans. A vast ripple of energy surged out and immediately forced open a small, normal space about 100 feet in diameter around him and Princess Zhonglu. In this space, the magnetic force was completely eliminated. Immediately, the 5-colored divine ray behind Princess Zhongli's back flared up, turning into various energies of earth, water, fire, wind, and all sorts of energy, swirling ceaselessly in this small space. Princess Zhongli's eyes went wide as she performed an incantation gesture with both hands and recited an incantation under her breath. A 5-colored ray swept out from all 10 of her fingers, transforming into a huge palm print that rolled towards the group of people who were rushing out of heaven-breaking sword sex abode. Wherever the five-colored ray passed, the pure magnetic force was gradually and forcibly broken down into all sorts of energy, including gold, wood, water, fire, earth, and all sorts of energy. The power of the black-robed man could destroy and merge everything, while the five-colored divine ray of Princess Zhang could intimidate and restore everything. The power of both of them happened to be two extremes. However, after all, her cultivation base was not as strong as the black-robed man. Before the five-colored divine ray of Princess Zhang could reach a distance of nearly 1 mile, it was already destroyed by the enormous magnetic force. The green ghost flame in the black-robed man's eyes shone into the distance. With a strange laugh coming out of his mouth, the magnetic force rocked and rolled around him, crushing the five-colored divine ray unleashed by Princess Zhang inch by inch. Princess Zhang face blushed with anxiety. Looking at Nie Yaonu, Nie Baihong, and the others, who were trapped in midair by the magnetic force, she coughed out a mouthful of blood. A bright light burst out from her palm, and the five-colored ray shot out once again for another half a mile. With her body that had just recovered from a serious injury, she consumed her prime blood essence to increase the power of the innate divine ability she inherited from her birth mother by 3 times. With that, she immediately broke through the blockade of the magnetic force. Nie Yaonu let out a long and sonorous cry. Her silvery white long hair fluttered in the air, bringing up wisps of sword energies that swept across all directions. Behind her back was a vast expanse of whiteness, as a wild gale formed from countless tiny sword energies soared up into the sky, transforming into 5 swift and fierce sword beams that shot straight into the sky. From her mouth shot out a sword beam that was as thick as a fist and over 100 feet long. Like an iron knife cutting a piece of paper, it shattered the extremely heavy magnetic force in front of her into pieces, opening up a path for the five-colored divine ray of Princess Zhang. Nie Yaonu coughed out a mouthful of blood. Her skin was densely covered with countless tiny blood spots. The enormous pressure from the magnetic force was repelled by her sword beams, causing her body to be unable to withstand the tremendous force. The blood vessels underneath her skin were torn, and blood was oozing out from her skin. Nie Yaonu let out a long and sonorous cry. Her long hair fluttered out quickly, coiling up Meng Xiaobai, Yan Bugui, Xiong Jin, and Xiong Yinren, then exerted all her strength and leaped towards the approaching five-colored divine ray. Coincidentally, the five-colored divine ray arrived, coiling up Nie Yaonu and her company, and retreated to the side of Wu Qi and Princess Zhang at lightning speed. The five-colored divine ray retreated very quickly, but the magnetic force recovered even faster. The enormous pressure kept smashing onto the five-colored divine ray, shaking Princess Zhang and all the people wrapped in the divine ray, causing their bodies to tremble violently. Fortunately, Xiong Jin and Xiong Yin, 2 demon bears of nascent soul realm, were still in the five-colored divine ray. They roared furiously, transforming into their true forms of iron-boned earth bears. 2 huge black bears, each about 100 feet tall, were waving their huge paws and slapping in all directions, using their tremendous force to counteract the magnetic force that kept surging towards them. Only then did Princess Zhang manage to bring all the people to her side. The black-robed man, who was busy dealing with the attacks from all the experts from the 13 immortal Dao sects, was taken aback. He turned to Wu Qi, sneered, and said, "You guys do have some tricks up your sleeves. This little girl has an excellent innate divine ability, and if she is offered to my emperor, he will definitely be delighted. She will not have the chance to be the imperial concubine, but she will definitely be given the title of imperial concubine." Amidst the faint, cold laughter, the black-robed man gently waved his fingers. Immediately, thousands of black sword gleams that could be seen with the naked eye, formed from the magnetic force of the Earth's core and swept out in all directions, killing all the people from the 13 immortal Dao sections. Apart from Lord Heavenly Spirit, Layman White Dawn, and a few other nascent soul experts who were here for the Rare Treasures Conference, as well as the cultivators from Green Spirit sect who left in advance out of exasperation, none of the cultivators from the other 11 immortal Dao sects could withstand a casual sword strike from the black-robed man. Wherever the sword beam went, all the magical treasures and flying swords were shattered into pieces by the extremely heavy sword beam. One after another, the bodies of Jin Dan human immortals and Xiantian Taoists were ripped to shreds, and even their souls were killed by the sword beam formed from the magnetic force. Nearly 100 dazzling Jin Dan swords transformed into tiny golden specks and fell into the sleeve of the black-robed man. Apart from Lord Heavenly Spirit and a few others, all the other cultivators were killed. As for those influential and wealthy people who participated in the auction in the abode, they were all bound by the magnetic force and hovered in midair, compressed into a meatball by a tremendous force. It looked like the black-robed man had made up his mind to capture these people alive. After killing those influential figures from 13 immortal Tao sects, the black-robed man sneered indifferently and said, "Wu Qi, you better surrender now. Little woman, don't resist, lest you break your skin and ruin your beauty." Upon hearing that the black-robed man wanted to capture Princess Zhang Lu alive and offer her to Yingzheng, Wu Qi was so angry that his scalp went numb, and the short hair that had just grown over the past month immediately stood up. He pointed his finger at the black-robed man and snapped, "Bullshit. That Yingzheng will not be able to touch even a single hair of Zhang Lu. What kind of bullshit emperor of Daqin dynasty is he? If he dares to touch even a single hair of Zhang Li's, I'll castrate him." Then, he casually pointed his finger out, unleashing 9 talismans that transformed into 9 golden lightning bolts and shot out. Suddenly, a large red cloud formed in the sky, amidst which, a huge cloud vortex spun at an incredible speed. In just a blink of an eye, 27 thunderbolts, each as thick as a water bucket, came roaring down from the sky. The black-robed man waved his hand in the air, transforming the invisible magnetic force into a thick shield and shielding his head. 27 thunderbolts smashed onto the magnetic force of the Earth's core. The thunderbolts exploded, causing the sky to collapse and the Earth to crack. Layers of magnetic force of the Earth's core were continuously shattered, but the black-robed man's body continued to gush out even stronger magnetic force of the Earth's core to replenish the shield. In just a blink of an eye, all 27 thunderbolts were consumed, and not even a hair of the black-robed man was touched by the thunderbolts. The black-robed man laughed mockingly, then turned to Wu Qi and cried out coldly, "Little brat, how dare you show off your power with just a few talismans? Hee, if I, Zhang Yi, am so easy to deal with, wouldn't I have lived for over 2,000 years in vain?" He casually pointed his finger out, unleashing hundreds of thousands of palm-sized flying daggers that were condensed from magnetic force and thrust towards Wu Qi. The black-robed man, Zhang Yi, had the intention to kill Wu Qi. He did not want to capture him alive, but wanted to kill his fleshly body and plunder his soul. Suddenly, countless starlights sprinkled down from the sky, transforming into a large misty net that tightly wrapped Wu Qi and his company. The magnetic flying daggers smashed into the starlight net and exploded, turning into dense energies of 5 elements and dispersing in the air. Countless 5-colored beams flashed and flashed in the sky, looking extremely enchanting. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, then slowly took off his cape and hood, revealing a lean face. Gently stroking his long beard, he laughed and said, "Since senior brother has arrived, why don't you come out and meet me? You and I are brothers, and it has been over 2,000 years since we last met." A dense ball of silver light descended from the sky. A middle-aged scholar clad in a white robe stepped on a winged serpent and slowly descended from the sky. Chapter 192. Zhang Yi and the white-robed scholar looked at each other for a full 15 minutes, and then they laughed together. Zhang Yi solemnly cupped his fists and bowed deeply to the white-robed scholar, saying, "Since we parted years ago, senior apprentice brother and I have been the prime ministers of the 2 countries. It has been a long time." The white-robed scholar smiled and nodded, saying, "Junior apprentice brother, you have great fortune and great merit. You helped the powerful Qin unify the world. In the past, among the many disciples of Master, no one could surpass junior apprentice brother in terms of merit." Zhang Yi shook his head repeatedly and said, "Senior martial brother, you are wrong. Back then, senior martial brother had the seal of the 6 countries at your waist. The 6 countries of Shandong were all under your control. Such achievements, such prestige, junior martial brother is far inferior to senior martial brother. The two looked at each other from a distance, and then laughed loudly at the same time. Their laughter was like the roar of a dragon deep in the mountains, causing the surrounding world to tremble. Wu Qi took a deep breath. The black-robed person was Zhang Yi, the Prime Minister of the Qin. And this white-robed person was the Prime Minister of the Yan, the one who had the seal of the 6 countries and led the armies of the 6 countries to attack Qin, Su Qin. Su Qin and Zhang Yi, the peerless geniuses under Gigu Zi, had met again today. The relationship between the two of them was very deep, but they were working for the enemy country. As the two of them talked and laughed, the world changed. The Warring States period was chaotic. While the two of them were talking and laughing, people were killed, and the flag of the city changed. Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh as he stared at the two men who stood facing each other in the sky. Right now, he did not even have the qualifications to go up and talk to them. All he could do was stand next to Princess Zhanglu and look at the pair of peerless geniuses, peerless monsters from afar, reminiscing about the changes that happened over 2,000 years ago, and the vigorous youth they once had. They were too strong. And Wu Qi was too weak. Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the stars in the sky. At this time, the sun in the west was still a flagpole's height from the top of the mountain, but because of Su Qin's secret technique, the countless stars in the sky were shining with dazzling light, visible in the day. He looked at this strange starry sky and suddenly had an urge to trample this world under his feet. Even if he could not completely conquer this world, he must one day be like these two people in front of him, possessing peerless skills and standing proudly above everyone else. While the two of them were talking and laughing, within a radius of 1,000 miles, the wind didn't move, the clouds didn't move, the water didn't flow, and the insects didn't make any noise. It was as if nothing else in the world was qualified to make a sound when the two of them were talking and laughing. Even Yan Dan, who came hurriedly from Ji City with a large group of cultivators, was only looking at Su Qin and Zhang Yi from afar with a hint of admiration in his eyes. He did not interrupt the conversation between these two fellow disciples. After a full hour, Su Qin and Zhang Yi finally ended their small talk. Both of them threw their heads back and let out 3 loud laughs into the sky. After that, without any sign, the coverage of the magnetic force suddenly expanded to an area of 100 miles in circumference. Countless dark yellow earth energies rolled up from underground, transforming into a very dense magnetic force that replenished Zhang Yi's body, transforming into a dark sword energy that blotted out the sky and slashed viciously towards Su Qin. Zhang Yi let out a loud laugh and raised both of his arms high up into the sky. Suddenly, all the stars in the sky began to pour down dense silver light that looked like raindrops. The silver light and purple mist swirled and blotted the sky, transforming into a gigantic net that covered an area of 100 miles in circumference. The silver light spun rapidly, and gradually became heavier and heavier. When the gigantic sword energy that was formed from the magnetic force of the earth approached, the starlight shield that was formed from the power of the stars greeted it head-on. A loud boom rang out, as Wu Qi and all the other men were knocked flying over 100 miles away by the frightening shockwave, from the venue of the Rare Treasures Conference all the way back to the sky above Ji City. From afar, one could only see a beam of dark light shooting out from the top of Zhang Yi's head, thrusting straight towards Su Qin. About 1,000 feet in front of Su Qin, there was a gigantic silver curtain that seemed to connect the heaven and the earth. No matter how the strong dark beam struck, it could only produce some faint ripples. Where the black and silver beams clashed with each other, countless tiny electric arcs splashed and splashed. These electric arcs, which were 100 times thinner than a strand of hair, exploded in all directions, creating countless holes of various sizes on the ground. The biggest hole among them was large enough to fill up a skyscraper. Wu Qi was lost in thought as he watched the fight between both men. There were no fancy tricks, no variations, just a pure contest of strength, using the purest strength to fight against the opponent. They were like two proud divine dragons soaring in the sky. They disdained to use any fancy tricks to show off their strength, and instead, chose to use the most primitive physical strength to decide the winner. The ground was shaking, and countless clouds were spinning at high speed in the sky. The starlight and geomagnetic force collided with each other, causing the space 10 miles around both men to shake violently, turning into a murky gray ball of light. The figures of both men were twisting and turning in the ball of light. Gradually, tiny blood marks kept bursting out from the surface of both men's bodies, and a great amount of blood sprayed out and scattered in all directions along with the strong wind. After a stalemate of 2 full hours, Zhang Yi suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, "Senior brother, I never thought that this time, we are going to fight for our respective masters again." Su Qin laughed wildly and said, "Junior brother, you have gained a great advantage this time. In this world, there is no allied army of 6 dynasties that you can order around. The distance between dynasties is too far. Senior brother can only use the power of Great Yan dynasty to fight against Daqin. You have gained the upper hand." Zhang Yi laughed out loud as well and said, "Senior brother, please don't lie to me. Your words can never be trusted. The Daqin today is not the Daqin of the past. The Great Yan today is also not the Great Yan of the past. You and I are brothers, so this is the perfect time for us to have a fair fight. Let's see who is more skillful as our master's disciples." Su Qin said impatiently, "You are absolutely right. I heard that the army of Daqin has appeared in the Meng Mountains, less than 400,000 miles away from the border of Great Yan. Senior brother has already deployed the army here, and is getting ready to fight Daqin to determine the winner. This place is different from our homeland. Conspiracies and tricks are useless here. If we want to determine the winner, let's have a fair fight. What do you think, junior brother?" Zhang Yi laughed, nodded his head and said, "You are absolutely right. Daqin is millions of miles away from Great Yan, and it is not convenient for us to deploy the army. If we want to determine the winner, we can only do it with a battle. Conspiracies and tricks are useless here." Ha, ha, ha. Both men laughed and laughed at the same time. However, Wu Qi could tell that the laughter between them was too fake. All of a sudden, a figure clad in a heavy armor emerged from the ground underneath the venue of the Rare Treasures Conference, where a large pit was dug out by Zhang Yi. The figure was holding a strong bow and a long arrow. Obviously, he was Li Xian, the man who nearly killed Wu Qi in Meng Mountains with just 3 arrows. The flying general of Daqin, Li Xian, was the ancestor of the flying general Li Guang in the future. His archery skill, which was secretly passed down in Li clan, was incredibly lethal. Without saying a word, Li Xian pulled the bowstring and released an arrow, aiming straight at Su Qin's back. When the arrow was released, the surrounding heaven and earth shook violently, as if a bright mirror was shattered by an enormous force. It gave off a feeling that the heaven and earth in that area was shattered. Li Xian's arrow actually had the power to shatter the void. It brought up a dazzling light, as if the sun was falling down from the sky, emitting a threatening heat as it pierced straight towards Su Qin's back. Right when Li Xian dashed out and launched a sneak attack on Su Qin, on a small hill 30 miles behind Zhang Yi, a general, who stood over 10 feet tall and had a waist circumference of nearly 10 feet, with a body like a sturdy iron ingot and a body filled with terrifyingly developed and explosive muscles, leaped out from the hill. This general, who had a body so strong that it could strike fear into anyone, was only wearing a piece of cloth wrapped around his waist, while his right hand was holding an ancient bronze spear. Ha! A furious roar rang out, as the general's right arm suddenly grew to twice its original length. The muscles on his arm bulged out, and under his skin, blue veins as thick as a baby's arm popped out. He leaned his body back forcefully, and the bronze spear suddenly transformed into a dazzling green beam, piercing straight towards Zhang Yi's back along with a frigid air. When the spear was thrust out, the ground under the man's feet shattered abruptly, and an area with a circumference of over 10 miles suddenly caved in, sinking a few miles deep. The spear transformed into a cold beam and shot out in all directions. Gradually, the spear lost its physical form, leaving behind only a large number of twisting runes, twisting and twisting, intertwining into a bright ball of light that looked like a comet, shooting up into the sky. Wherever the spear passed, the magnetic force controlled by Zhang Yi would shatter with a loud rumble, creating a huge tunnel in the ground. The spear seemed to be able to penetrate through no man's land, and in the blink of an eye, it had arrived behind Zhang Yi. Clang! Clang! Two loud noises rang out. Right at the moment when Su Qin and Zhang Yi's bodies were about to be penetrated by the arrow and the spear, both of them turned around at the same time. The black sword beam shot out by Zhang Yi abruptly made a sharp turn, rushing towards the spear behind him. The black sword beam transformed from magnetic force clashed and rubbed against the spear, producing a deafening explosion. The air twisted, and Zhang Yi's body suddenly trembled. The spear shattered the black sword beam shot out by him, pierced deep into his chest, and came out from his back. Su Qin turned around as well, using a silver light screen to block the arrow that shone as bright as the sun. However, the defensive power of his light screen spread out instead of condensing, and the piercing power of the arrow was concentrated on a single point. Just like Zhang Yi, his light screen was shattered, and the arrow shot out by Li Xian pierced through his light screen, pierced through his chest, and came out from his back. Both of them let out a miserable howl at the same time. Su Qin gave a long laugh and said, "Today, I, Flying General Li Xian, have had a taste of your amazing archery. In the future, Su Qin, will definitely repay your kindness. I will definitely make General Li Xian die without a burial place." Zhang Yi covered the wound on his chest with his hand, where blood kept spurting out. He laughed and said, "Is it General Fan Yuqi who wounded me? I didn't expect General Fan to be here as well." "Ha ha ha, just like what Senior Marshal Brother said, General Fan Yuqi, Zhang Yi will definitely find a way to destroy your soul, never to be reincarnated. Only then will I be able to repay the kindness of severely injuring you today." Both Senior Marshal Brother and Chi-Chi coughed out a mouthful of blood, while Zhang Yi abruptly transformed into a dark beam of light, rolled up Li Xian and flew several hundred miles away in just a blink of an eye. In just a blink of an eye, they had vanished without a trace. Su Qin did not chase after them. Instead, he tilted his body, stepped on the flying serpent, and flew back to Ji City. While coughing out mouthful after mouthful of blood in a casual manner, he still bowed at Yan Dan with an extremely graceful manner, smiled and said, "Your Majesty, that junior marshal brother of mine is here. Great Yan is going to have a lot of troubles this time." "Hee, what Duke of Tianyun said is true. You have really bumped into the army of Daqin in Meng Mountains." Wu Qi looked at Su Qin, who was coughing out mouthful after mouthful of blood as if he was just playing with his own saliva. Wu Qi could not help but twitch his lips. This pair of senior and junior martial brothers were indeed the peerless evil men of their generation. Since they could be so ruthless to their fellow disciples who had a very good relationship with them, they were even more ruthless to themselves. Zhang Yi was severely wounded, but he still had to burn his blood essence and flee for his life in a sorry state. On the other hand, Su Qin was severely wounded, but he still had to pretend to be a gentleman and report to Yan Dan. They were indeed a pair of monsters, absolutely a pair of monsters. But, Zhang Yi had chased them all the way to Ji City. Wu Qi had a headache. He had to be extra careful in the coming days. Chapter 193. The Rare Treasures Conference had come to a tragic end. Among all 13 immortal sects, except for Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect and Green Spirit Sect, all the other 11 sects were holding funerals. Zhang Yi, together with Li Xian and some other hidden experts, had come to attack Great Yan Dynasty, giving them a fierce slap on the face before leaving. If not for Su Qin and Fan Yuqi joining hands and severely wounding Zhang Yi, Great Yan Dynasty would have lost all its face. Even though Zhang Yi was severely wounded and had fled far away, Su Qin was wounded by Li Xian's arrow as well. His injury was almost the same as Zhang Yi's, and neither of them had gained the upper hand. How Great Yan Dynasty was going to face the imminent threat from Daqin had nothing to do with Wu Qi. He was just a Duke of Tianyun without any real power. What he was thinking now was how to improve his overall strength and power, and how to save his own life in the all-out war that was likely to break out in the future. Zhang Yi and Li Xian had traveled tens of thousands of miles all the way to Ji City, claiming that they were going to capture Wu Qi alive and bring him back to Yingzheng to vent his anger. It was evident that Da Qin and the others hated Wu Qi to the core. If he didn't prepare some life-saving measures as soon as possible, even those secret palaces in Meng Mountains would not be able to give Wu Qi too much security. Just one group of secret palaces was not enough. Wu Qi pondered for a long while, and finally decided to continue building secret palaces for escaping and hiding. Not only in Meng Mountains in the west, but also in the mountains in the south, the ocean in the east, and the snowfield in the north, all those remote and desolate places that no one had ever visited since the ancient times. After sending the infatuated Princess Zhang Li back to the imperial palace, Wu Qi hurried back to Duke Yan Li's mansion and plunged into his own abode. For the sake of the Black Dragon Spirit Ring, Yingzheng had sent Zhang Yi, a trusted minister, to pursue him for tens of thousands of miles. Wu Qi could not wait to find out what exactly was in the ring. When he was in Meng Mountains, he had no time to check the items stored in the ring. Therefore, he had no idea what kind of precious treasures were stored in it that made Yingzheng attach so much importance to it. For the sake of this ring, Zhang Yi did not hesitate to travel tens of thousands of miles and venture deep into Ji City, a place that was as dangerous as a tiger's den or a dragon's pool. If there were not some important treasures in this Black Dragon Spirit Ring, Wu Qi would be very sad. The Black Dragon Spirit Ring had a beautiful design, as it was entirely made up of a tiny black flood dragon coiling around its body. The majestic and imposing Jiao dragon had 360 scales on its body, which was exactly the number of a heavenly cycle. There were countless tiny runes engraved on the surface of the scales. Wu Qi had to activate the mystic eyes of universe before he could clearly see the runes on the scales. Surprisingly, they had formed a great array with astonishing defensive power. Not only was it a defensive formation, it was also a ring that did not need to be controlled by anyone, nor did it need to be replenished with spirit stones. Normally, the ring would absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth on its own to replenish its energy. Once it was in danger, it would automatically activate to protect its owner. This was already a function that only high-grade spiritual weapons could have. Just by recognizing this formation, Wu Qi grinned happily. It was an upper-grade spirit weapon that could automatically protect its owner, and its value was not worth mentioning. If not for the fact that Yingzheng was badly beaten by Wanying Dragon King, causing the Black Dragon Spirit Ring to automatically protect its owner and deplete all the energy stored in the ring, Wu Qi would not have been able to steal it from Yingzheng so easily. Complacently, he wore the ring on his middle finger. The size was just right. Wu Qi nodded his head complacently, then sent his divine sense into the ring. Right when his divine sense entered the ring, Wu Qi's vision suddenly turned dark. It was as if he had arrived above a boundless ocean, and a huge black divine dragon, with the length of over 1,000 miles, had its mouth wide open, roaring and cursing at him arrogantly. "Where did you come from, little rascal? How dare you invade my territory? Get the hell out of here! Get the hell out of here!" Countless lightning bolts came whistling down, shattering the thread of divine sense that Wu Qi had sent into the ring. A stream of blood sprayed out from Wu Qi's nostrils. He retracted his divine sense in a sorry state, panting and lying down on the soft couch. Bastard! How could the item spirit of this thing be so powerful? This ring is only an upper-grade spirit item, but the grade of its item spirit is far beyond the ring itself. Could it be that the grade of this ring was originally far beyond upper-grade spirit item, but it was severely injured by someone? Weighing the Black Dragon Spirit Ring in his hand, Wu Qi spat out a silver lotus without hesitation and threw the ring into the stamen of the silver lotus. Without hesitation, the divine flame of order, which was 1 foot and 2 inches long and had the thickness of a finger, was thrust towards the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. In an instant, the ring let out a sizzling noise as it burned, and a tiny, vivid shadow of a black flood dragon abruptly emerged from within the ring. It transformed into a 1-foot-long dragon shadow, roaring desperately amidst the divine flame of order. "Keep on howling. No one will come and save you even if you scream yourself hoarse." Wu Qi crossed his arms before his chest, staring coldly at the black flood dragon, who was struggling and twitching crazily and wailing. He sneered and said, "Your master can't save you. If you want to live, you better hand over your prime nascent divinity, and let me, Wu Qi, leave a tiny mark on your nascent divinity." The black flood dragon kept howling crazily, but did not pay any attention to Wu Qi. Wu Qi frowned. For a moment, he was filled with courage, and an evil thought filled his mind. He opened his mouth and spat out a stream of innate wood element energy towards the divine flame of order, making the purple-green innate divine flame burn fiercely. Wu Qi stared at the black flood dragon, grinned hideously and said, "You don't want to submit? Then, I'll refine you alive. Hee, how many times stronger will my soul be after I completely refine the soul of a flood dragon? My attainment in the Tao of primordial talismans will be greatly improved. Hee, after I refine you, I'll put the soul of a wild boar into this ring, and I'll still be able to control it." The black flood dragon was trembling with anger. He roared furiously, "This black dragon's spirit ring is crafted with my true body. How dare you replace my prime soul essence with the soul of a wild boar to control it? You little rascal." Wu Qi roared angrily, "Either submit to me, or be refined and absorbed by me. It's up to you. You call yourself a dragon god, and I have a body-strengthening technique for flood dragons. Help me check if it's complete." With a wave of his hand, a light screen emerged right next to Wu Qi. On it were numerous twisted characters of primordial dragons. It was the body-strengthening technique taught by Wanying Dragon King to Catfish Flood Dragon, and then taught to Wu Qi by Catfish Flood Dragon. The black flood dragon glanced at the body-tempering technique and couldn't help but sneer, "Laughable, what kind of body-tempering technique is this? This is just a body-strengthening technique for those hybrid flood dragons who have yet to step into the realm of heaven immortal. What I've inherited is the body-strengthening technique of the true divine dragon. But, you can never make me hand over the body-strengthening technique of my clan. Even Ing Zheng, the emperor of Qin dynasty, failed to subdue me. I'm just borrowing his dragon energy to nourish my divine soul and restore my divine ability temporarily. You can never make me submit to you. Refuse to submit? Fine, you can die now." Seeing that the black flood dragon was so straightforward with his words, Wu Qi was even more straightforward. He sprayed out a huge amount of innate wood element energy, stimulating the divine flame of order and making it burn fiercely. In just a blink of an eye, 70% of the black flood dragon's body was refined, turning into a tiny, 3 inches long black flood dragon, twisting and struggling amidst the divine flame. A huge amount of pure soul particles shot out in all directions. Wu Qi took a deep breath and absorbed all the particles into his body. To his surprise, the soul of this black flood dragon was at least 10 times stronger than Su Fu's soul. After absorbing and refining the soul energy, the strength of Wu Qi's soul skyrocketed once again. He felt that his spiritual ocean was showing signs of being unable to contain his soul, and his spiritual ocean was gradually expanding because of the pressure caused by the soul energy, and the speed of expansion was getting faster and faster. Meanwhile, his divine sense had become stronger as well, showing signs of materializing. Just from the strength of his divine sense, Wu Qi was now comparable to an earth immortal of peak stage nascent soul realm. Not even in his wildest dreams could the black flood dragon expect that Wu Qi would be so ruthless. He let out a miserable howl, and 70% of the soul energy that he had spent thousands of years to recover was devoured and refined by Wu Qi. He kept howling, glaring at Wu Qi with hatred and roaring, "Little brat, what makes you think you can order me around? No matter what, I am the descendant of an ancient divine dragon, and I had the cultivation base of a 33rd tier heaven immortal when I was alive. You." Wu Qi stared at the black flood dragon coldly, then sprayed out another mouthful of innate wood element energy. Once again, the divine flame of order expanded crazily, melting away more than half of the flood dragon's soul. At this point, the length of his soul was only slightly more than 1 inch, turning into a nearly translucent black flood dragon, panting heavily as he hovered and struggled desperately in the divine flame of order. Wu Qi grinned hideously and said, I hate fools like you who don't know the difference between life and death the most, and are still stubborn even when death is at hand. This is your last chance. Either you follow me willingly and let me control your nascent divinity, serve me as your master, and offer me all your cultivation techniques and mystic techniques, or become a part of my soul. Otherwise, you'll become a part of my soul. I'll use the soul-searching technique and have a 50% chance of obtaining everything I want from your soul. The black flood dragon stared blankly at Wu Qi, then suddenly burst into tears. Why are you even more ferocious than Yingzheng? At least, he still has the demeanor of an emperor, but you are just a scoundrel. You, Wu. Wailing, the black flood dragon obediently opened up his soul, exposing his nascent divinity before Wu Qi. Then, Wu Qi sent out a thread of divine sense and left a deep mark on the black dragon's nascent divinity, completely controlling his life and death. Then, he scolded, You rascal, you need to be taught a lesson. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said coolly, Don't think Yingzheng is too kind, and don't think I, your master, am too ferocious. If Yingzheng has an innate divine flame that can deal with souls, he will still refine you. Sneering at the dying black dragon, Wu Qi shook his head and said, The demeanor of an emperor? That is bullshit. After giving the black dragon a harsh lesson, Wu Qi was too lazy to ask for his name. He had sent his divine sense into the black dragon's spirit ring. An enormous storage space appeared before Wu Qi's eyes. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and was struck dumb by what he saw. The storage space of this black dragon's spirit ring was shockingly huge, so huge that it made it difficult for him to breathe. According to the records in Scroll of Stealing, a storage space of over 10 miles in length, width, and height could be ranked as a lower-grade immortal item. The enormous storage space was nearly filled to the brim. All kinds of rare herbs, blood essence of demon beasts, demon cores, skins, bones, muscles, and many other materials of demon beasts were piled up like mountains. Among them, the most precious items were located right in the center of the storage space, where 3 large golden water vats were stored, each containing several tens of thousands of kilograms of flood dragon blood essence. They were the flood dragon blood essence that Yingzheng was cultivating with the 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic, but due to the lack of strength of his fleshly body, he could not absorb them. Therefore, they were all stored here. The amount of these blood essences was a few times more than the ones Wu Qi had extorted from Catfish Flood Dragon. Except for a few energy stones of various colors, the rest of the precious materials in the ring made Wu Qi feel like he was a starving mouse that had fallen into a rice coop. The black dragon murmured under his breath, all the precious herbs and demon beasts materials that Yingzheng had spent 300 years collecting in Meng Mountains are all here. Wu Qi felt his hands trembling. All the precious herbs and demon beasts materials that Yingzheng had collected after spending 300 years exploring the new territory in Meng Mountains were all here. The painstaking collection of Yingzheng for 300 years. No wonder Zhang Yi would come all the way to Ji City to hunt him down. Rich. Wu Qi suddenly burst into a loud laughter. Chapter 194. Inside the abode, Wu Qi's body was shrouded in a layer of dark mist, and there was a vague dragon roar coming from his throat. The muscles on his body were wriggling and wriggling in a way that was impossible for the muscles of human beings to achieve. Frightening noises of muscles and bones breaking and reassembling kept coming out from his body. A threatening pressure kept spreading out from his body. At this moment, Wu Qi did not look like a human anymore, but more like an ancient beast that came from the primordial era. He spread both of his palms, which looked like the claws of a dragon, and kept forming one strange incantation gesture after another. Slowly, he guided the enormous blood essence of dragon in his body and made it flow in his body, strengthening himself. After cultivating the Dharma body of an earth immortal with the enormous energy essence and medicinal strength from Shi Tianma and his son, Wu Qi's body had become as strong as an alloy ingot. However, the secret body strengthening technique, the dragon transformation script, taught to him by the item spirit, the black dragon, had gradually transformed his body from an alloy ingot into a divine weapon that had been thoroughly tempered. It had become denser, tougher, and sharper. In other words, it had become stronger and more lethal. Especially, the blood essence of dragon, which contained an enormous amount of life force, had made Wuqi's life force stronger and more vigorous. No matter it was the flow of his qi and blood, or the recovery ability of his fleshly body, all of them had been improved by several orders of magnitude. In just 7 days of cultivation, the functions of Wuqi's fleshly body had gone through a tremendous transformation. Back then, with the cultivation base of Jin Dan realm, Bai Qitian was able to fight equally with Wuqi by relying on the secret body strengthening technique. But now, if Bai Qitian dared to fight Wuqi with his fist, his body would definitely be smashed into pieces by Wuqi easily. Sensing the power that was surging and flowing violently in his body like a great river, and sensing that the density and weight of his body had increased greatly, Wuqi clapped his hands and slowly rose to his feet from the soft couch. The dark mist that coiled around his body was gradually absorbed by his body. Wuqi swung his fist, and the air in front of his fist exploded abruptly, producing a loud and clear popping sound. Compared to 7 days ago, the strength of his fleshly body had increased by about 30%, and his meridians had expanded by more than 10%. The total amount and quality of energy that his body could hold had improved. All of these would bring great benefits to Wuqi's future cultivation. The reason why the magical power and divine ability of dragons were stronger than the immortals of the same level was because their strong of fleshly body could hold more powerful and pure magical power. While stroking the black dragon spirit ring, Wuqi warned coldly, "Black dragon, do what an item spirit should do. Don't of your past glory. You were just a 33rd tier heaven immortal, of when of was, of the spirit Ming ring. Anyway, remember, as long as I'm alive, you'll still be free one day. Of my, and of. Wu. On, the ring, qi, wu, of the of. The natural energies in the surroundings were constantly being absorbed by the dragon's mouth. Gradually, the scales on the surface of the ring began to emit a faint gleam, making the black dragon's spirit ring look darker and more inconspicuous. Served by serving ladies, Wuqi washed his face and rinsed his mouth. After that, he changed into a pale green long robe and put on a large overcoat with white feathers. After that, he summoned Meng Xiaobai and a group of trusted subordinates, riding out from Duke Yan Li's mansion. This time, Wuqi left Xiong Yin at Lu Chengfeng's side, and brought only Xiong Jin, Xiong Qing, and his 6 brothers with him on this journey. Since Zhang Yi had appeared in Ji City, only God knew if there were any soldiers of Daqin lying in ambush inside and outside of Ji City. The current Ji City had become more dangerous than before. As there were too many things that he had to deal with, and Wuqi only had himself to rely on, some of them had been piling up for a long time, and he had to find some time to deal with them. The group walked along the main street and left the inner city, arriving at the mighty Marshall Street, which had become much more deserted. Wuqi gave a few orders, then Yan Bugui brought a few secret agents of scouting office and brought over the administrative officer of the district where the mighty Marshall Street was located. After some official documents were exchanged, Wuqi had taken over all the houses and properties of 20 Marshall clubs on the mighty Marshall Street, including Sher Marshall Club, without paying any price. As Yan Dan had launched an attack and carried out a massive purge, the number of Marshall clubs on the mighty Marshall Street had been reduced to less than 10%. When all 20 Marshall clubs occupied by Wuqi were connected together, they occupied a very large area. The houses and pavilions were large enough to accommodate nearly 100,000 soldiers. Bringing the company and taking a tour around these 20 martial clubs, Wuqi pointed at them and gave them some instructions, asking Zhang Hu to write down his words. The walls between the martial clubs needed to be broken down, and a new defensive wall needed to be built on the outside. Of course, the defensive wall could not be as big as the city wall of Ji City, as that would be suspected of treason. Therefore, it was necessary to build some necessary defensive facilities and traps between the martial clubs. As an experienced barbarian hunter, Zhang Hu naturally knew how to arrange all these traps and mechanisms. After taking a tour, Wu Qi and the company returned to the front entrance of Shi Martial Club. Looking at the upper edge of the front entrance, where the plaque had been removed, Wu Qi took out a 10,000 years old ironwood pillar, about 10 feet in diameter. Then, he unleashed the sword of greedy wolf and peeled the huge wooden pillar into a 10 feet tall and 80 feet long plaque. Then, Wu Qi carved a row of large characters on the plaque, which looked extremely arrogant, the number 1 martial club under the heavens. Yen Bugui and the company stared at this ridiculously huge plaque, which was worded in an overly ridiculous manner, and gasped in astonishment. However, Wu Qi was smiling as he looked at his own work. Then, he casually placed the plaque in front of the front entrance and said, "Xiao Bai, find a few skilled craftsmen. Don't use gold paint, just inlay it with pure gold. It must be inlaid with pure gold, that will make it look grand." Meng Xiaobai let out a few hollow laughs and agreed to the task. Wu Qi crossed his arms over his chest, happily looking at the plaque he had made. He smiled and said, "The 15,000 soldiers from Little Meng City are just 2 days away from Ji City. Those good friends of young master are coming along with them, and they will be here soon. Prepare to receive them in the next few days, and arrange for those soldiers to stay in this martial club, making them the apprentices of this club." Pointing at Meng Xiaobai, Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, Luo Kadi, Ma Yang, and a few other hanger-ons of Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi smiled and said, "You will be the instructors of this martial club. Train these soldiers well, and make sure they become elites. 15,000 soldiers are not enough. Once we are done with the arrangement, we'll need to recruit more wandering knights from Ji City. It will be best if we can gather a total of 100,000 soldiers." Upon hearing the order from Wu Qi, Yen Bugui hastily let out a few coughs. He reminded Wu Qi, "The dukes of Great Yen Dynasty are divided into 13 grades. Our sect leader is the highest grade, the duke with purple jade seal. According to the law of Great Yen Dynasty, he can have 3,000 personal guards in Ji City. You are the lowest grade, the 13th grade, the green ribbon iron seal duke. The number of personal guards you can have is no more than 100. The maximum number of private guards Duke Yen Lu can have is no more than 3,100. Looking at Yen Bugui thoughtfully, Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "So, in other words, the 15,000 soldiers that we've spent months and painstakingly brought here from Little Meng City is against the law of Great Yen Dynasty?" Yen Bugui quickly nodded his head and said, "Yes, it is against the law of Great Yen Dynasty. Only the 8 princes and the various princes are allowed to have more than 10,000 personal guards in Ji City. No matter it is the sect leader, Duke Qingfeng, or you, even if both of your titles are added together, if the fact that you have 15,000 private guards will be known by someone, you will be in big trouble." Wu Qi clapped his hands pleasantly, smiled and said, "Then, all the apprentices of this number 1 martial club under the heavens have nothing to do with Duke Yen Li's mansion. They are just a simple martial club. But, we can hire them to work for us. We're spending money to hire people to kill for us. Isn't this not against the law of Great Yen Dynasty?" Yen Bugui remained silent and nodded his head helplessly. Wu Qi smiled, nodded his head satisfyingly and said, "That's right. So, this number 1 martial club under the heavens has nothing to do with Duke Yen Lu and me, Duke Tianyun. They are just a simple, pure martial club under the heavens, and all the apprentices are free and wandering swordsmen. We, Duke Yen Lu, occasionally spend money to hire them to work for us. This is completely within the law." Yen Bugui twitched his lips, but he couldn't say a single word. Wu Qi let out a few complacent laughs, then beckoned Meng Xiaobai and his trusted subordinates, smiled and said, "All right, this place is spacious enough. Follow me, I'll give you some benefits. After following me for so long, all of you are diligent in your work." Wu Qi will never forget his brothers. This time, Wu Qi had brought all 600 elite men of Meng village and all the subordinates of Hu Wei here. He was planning to give them some benefits. The blood essence of Flood Dragon would transform them completely, and then they would be allowed to cultivate the body-strengthening technique of Flood Dragon lineage taught to Wu Qi by Catfish Flood Dragon. After a period of observation, Wu Qi had completely put his mind at ease with these men around him. They were all loyal and reliable men, worthy of him spending a great amount of effort to cultivate them. Together with the blood essence of Flood Dragon and the body-strengthening technique of Flood Dragon lineage, in the future, they would at least possess a cultivation base comparable to the respiration of Xiantian realm. And in the future, the high-end combat force under Wu Qi's control would be these 100 longbow men. Wu Qi planned to concoct the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup in the next 2 days no matter what, so that these longbow men could properly temper their fleshly bodies, allowing them to improve their cultivation base as soon as possible. While walking towards the martial club, Wu Qi was calculating the things he needed to handle. Only then did he realize that the things he had to handle were really complicated. He had to cultivate himself, and at the same time, he had to take care of all these things at the same time. It was really complicated, and he had to think carefully before he could do anything. Fortunately, those sons of concubine who were friends with Lu Qingfeng were about to arrive at Ji City. Once they arrived, Wu Qi wouldn't have to handle everything by himself. Wu Qi had already prepared a general development strategy for Duke Yan Li's mansion. Once these men arrived, he would be able to let them handle all the things. As long as Wu Qi could focus on his own cultivation and cultivate a group of powerful subordinates, he would have a much easier time. While he was pondering over these problems, a series of deep, muffled clatter of horse hooves was suddenly heard coming from the end of mighty Marshall Street. A golden-eyed Qilin horse, with a single horn growing out of its head, its body fully covered in red scales, and its hooves shrouded in red flaming clouds, was seen dashing crazily from the end of the street. A military officer clad in a red heavy armor was seen riding on the back of the Qilin horse, holding an 18-feet-long golden coiling dragon spear in his hand. He was charging straight towards Wu Qi while leaving a blinding flame in the air. Luo Kadi, who was standing at the outermost, let out a furious cry, drew out his sword and greeted the military officer. Clang! The 1,000 refined water-patterned sword in Luo Kadi's hand was shattered into pieces by the golden spear. The spear pierced through his right shoulder and came out from his back, hanging him on the spear's shaft. With the momentum of the charge, it threw him several hundred feet away. The Qilin horse stopped abruptly. The military officer raised the golden spear and slowly pointed it at Wu Qi. Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi. Where did this little clown come from? How dare you hurt my beloved son? I'm the chief commander of Great Yan's Roaring Tiger Battalion, Yu Su, the general of Great Yan's vanguard army. I challenge Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi of Great Yan dynasty. Fight to the death, fight to the death, fight to the death, fight to the death. After 3 loud roars, a large sheet of flame burst out from Yu Su's body, amidst which, a vague image of a fierce tiger could be seen leaping and roaring amidst the flame. Driven by Jin Dan's peak-level cultivation base, Yu Su's roar spread across the entire Ji City. It was obvious to see how angry Princess Xianglu was. Countless roofs of mansions around Duke Yan Li's mansion had suffered a calamity. They were riddled with holes, and countless servants were injured by the falling debris. Jing Ke coughed loudly, put down the wine dipper, and said indifferently, "If your highness really kills Yu Su, not only will his majesty be put in a difficult position, how can Wu Qi face the public in the future? As a man of Great Yan dynasty, if he doesn't have the courage to draw his sword and fight back after being humiliated in front of others, how can he face the public in the future?" Taking a deep breath, Jing Ke continued with a cold voice, "Wu Qi has even promised Yu Su that he will have a life-and-death duel with Yu Su in the drill ground of Imperial Palace 1 month later. A gentleman will never regret his promise even if he dies 10,000 times. It is fine if he rejected the challenge that day, but since he has agreed to it, there is no way he can avoid the duel." Princess Xianglu was so angry that her body was trembling. She spun and gave Jing Ke a fierce glare, then turned to Wu Qi and roared furiously, "Why are you so stupid? Why did you agree to the duel with Yu Su? You hurt Yu Su, but that is because he took the initiative to hurt you. Grandpa has already reprimanded him, so why? Jing Ke interrupted Princess Zhang Li's words and said with an indifferent tone, "Your Highness, that's enough. Don't get angry, or else, things will only get messier. Currently, Great Yan Dynasty is faced with the threat of Daqin, and there are so many messy internal affairs. A few days ago, a few core members of Wei Merchant were captured alive. Currently, His Majesty has a lot of things to deal with. If Your Highness continues to add more troubles at this moment, I'm afraid Your Highness will be dragged into it." Sighing, Jing Ke looked at Wu Qi curiously and said, "But, I'd like to know, Wu Qi, why did you agree to the duel with Yu Su? The gap between your cultivation base is too huge. If you refused his challenge, he would not be able to do anything to you." Wu Qi smiled faintly, then said with a cold voice, "But, he hurt one of our men right in front of me. Under such circumstances, I have no choice but to fight him." Wu Qi knew that he was too impulsive when he agreed to the duel with Yu Su. But, just let it be. The scene of Zhang Yi and Su Qin hovering in the sky, looking down at the world as if it was nothing, flashed across Wu Qi's mind. It was just a duel with Yu Su, so why should Wu Qi be afraid of him? "If you want to challenge me, then I'll fight you. I'll beat your head until it bleeds, and let you die with everlasting regret." It would also serve as a warning to some people in Ji City, so that they would not take Wu Qi as a pushover. Otherwise, if a group of Jin Dan human immortals were plotting to assassinate Wu Qi, it would be very annoying. With a cold smile on his face, Wu Qi continued in an indifferent tone, "Furthermore, since Yu Su has disregarded his status and insulted Wu Qi's master and parents with his words, it would be very troublesome. No wonder Wu Qi is willing to risk everything to fight him. Even though he has the cultivation base of peak Jin Dan realm, and Wu Qi has only cultivated the overall strength of Xiantian realm. But, it is not impossible to form the Jin Dan in just 1 month." Princess Zhang Li's eyes went wide in shock. She roared furiously, "Wu Qi, are you crazy? There is indeed a mystic technique that can help one form the Jin Dan in a short period of time. But, that mystic technique can only be used by 1,000 people, and only 1 out of 10,000 people can survive. Are you really crazy?" Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then shook his head, sighed and said, "Zi Xian, Wu Qi had no choice but to do that. Right in front of me, Yu Su had severely wounded Luo Kadi with his spear, nearly destroying him completely. If I don't risk my life to fight him, how is Duke Yan Le going to stand tall in front of the people in Ji City?" Amidst the wild wind, a white lightning bolt suddenly dashed into the hall. Enshrouded in an immense sword energy, Nia Baiheng walked into the hall step by step. Looking at the deep footprints on the smooth floor tiles, Wu Qi couldn't help but feel a pang of pain in his heart. Why did this cheap master of his always destroy so many things wherever he went? These floor tiles were all supreme-grade products handcrafted by expert craftsmen, and each of them was worth a fortune. Yet, he had ruined so many of them. Nia Baiheng had no idea what was going on in Wu Qi's mind, or else he would definitely have drawn his sword and hacked at him. Bringing with him a frigid air, Nia Baiheng walked into the hall amidst the violent hailstorm and said coldly, "Stop arguing. Yu Su's words have insulted me as well." He. Did he just say that Wu Qi is a man trained by pigs and dogs? Doesn't that mean I'm also a man like a pig and dog? In this duel, I will fight on behalf of Wu Qi. Princess Zhang Li's twisted face immediately turned into a bright smile. She clapped her hands and said, "Excellent. My nephew Baiheng is such an obedient and considerate man. I'll let you handle this matter. Just kill Yu Su with a single sword strike, and everything will be clean. If Yui dares to say anything, I'll make sure to wreak havoc in Yu clan." Slowly, Wu Qi rose to his feet, then bowed solemnly at Nia Baiheng and Princess Zhang. He smiled and said, "Master, Zi Xian, if this is really the case, Wu Qi will be too ashamed to face anyone. Since I've agreed to fight Yu Su, even if I know I'll die, I'll try my best to give it a try. Zi Xian, please help Wu Qi get a few Jin Dan pills from the inner treasury of Imperial Palace, as well as the herbs needed for forming my gold core using the secret technique. Wu Qi will be eternally grateful." With a proud smile on his face, Wu Qi looked at Princess Zhanglu, whose face had turned pale immediately, and comforted her. When forming a gold core using the secret technique, as the corporeal body cannot withstand the impact of the Jin Dan and the medicinal strength, the fleshly body will crack and die. However, Wu Qi has saved a catfish flood dragon in Meng Mountains, and asked her for some blood essence to strengthen his corporeal body. With that, I can guarantee the success of forming my gold core. With a loud laugh, Wu Qi suddenly thrust his fist out, thrusting it towards Jing Ke's face. For this punch, Wu Qi had only used less than 10% of his strength. Carelessly, Jing Ke countered with his palm. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, "Blood essence of dragon can strengthen the corporeal body, but..." Before his words could fade away, Wu Qi's fist had already landed on Jing Ke's palm. Abruptly, Jing Ke's eyes went wide, and he let out a strange cry due to fear. With just one punch, his burly body was knocked flying backward, smashing through the curtain behind him, and rolled like a ball into the back hall, unable to stabilize his body for a long while. After a long while, Jing Ke finally came out from the back hall, rubbing his swollen right palm. He stared blankly at Wu Qi and said angrily, "How could your corporeal body?" Wu Qi rolled his eyes, clasped his hands behind his back and said proudly, "When I was young, Wu Qi accidentally ate a 10,000 years old dragon blood centipede grass in the depth of Meng Mountains. Since then, my corporeal body has been 100 times stronger than ordinary people. And now, I have obtained the blood essence of Flood Dragon, which has strengthened my corporeal body even further. The corporeal body of an ordinary Jin Dan human immortal is definitely not as strong as Wu Qi's. Using the mystic technique to form my gold core, Wu Qi has full confidence in succeeding." The eyes of Princess Zhanglu, Jing Ke, Nia Baihong, and Lu Qingfeng immediately lit up. 4 of them came up to Wu Qi at the same time, sizing him up from head to toe for a long while. Jing Ke kept rubbing Wu Qi's body for a while, then finally nodded his head, smiled and said, "Indeed, your corporeal body is very strong. Hehe, forming your gold core using the mystic technique is definitely not a problem. You don't need to steal Jin Dan from the Imperial Treasury, as there are over 30 upper-grade Jin Dan left behind by human immortals of Jin Dan in Jing Ming's mansion. I'll give you a few of them, and you can use them as you please." Princess Zhanglu smiled and said, "Zi Xian has also recalled that there are some spirit medicines in the Imperial Treasury that can strengthen one's fleshly body. If you let Wu Qi consume them, he will have a greater chance of success." Lu Qingfeng pondered and said, "But, after all, Yu Su's overall strength is at the peak of Jin Dan realm. Even if Wu Qi forms his Jin Dan, there is still no way he can fight against him, right?" Wu Qi gave a strange laugh as he turned to look at Nia Baihong. Nia Baihong's eyes lit up as he laughed and said, "But, during the Rare Treasures Conference, Wu Qi has bought 2 acquired spirit pearls. They are extremely powerful, and a cultivator of Jin Dan realm can use them slightly. With that, he will have no problem dealing with Yu Su." Jing Ke clenched his teeth and said, "Jing Ke will invite Gao Jianli to protect Wu Qi, and we will definitely help him form his Jin Dan. Jing Ke will go find old Mr. Now, asking him to get a set of excellent defensive armor from Mo sect, and also a set of powerful weapons made by Mo sect." "Humph." Jing Ke patted on Wu Qi's shoulder, sneered and said, "If you can win the duel." He pressed on Wu Qi's shoulder, sighed and said, "If you can win the duel, you will be Jing Ke's nephew in the future." Shaking his head, Jing Ke strode out of the grand hall. Zhang Lu, Nia Baihong, and Lu Qingfeng went through a round of discussing all kinds of battle plans that could guarantee the success of Wu Qi's duel. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was looking thoughtfully at Jing Ke's back as he left. When the news about the duel between Wu Qi and Yu Su was spread out, Jing Ke immediately paid him a visit, and he had a rather strange expression on his face. And now, he was talking in such a strange manner. Could it be that he had unintentionally gotten himself involved in some unknown battle? But, he was really wronged, as Wu Qi really knew nothing about it. So, why would he get himself involved in such a matter? Shaking his head and sighing for a while, Wu Qi's eyes turned cold as he made up his mind. No matter what kind of background he had, he would kill Yu Su 1 month later. Chapter 196. Once again, Yu Su answered with the utmost respect. His face was filled with an insatiable smile of hunger and thirst. He gave a fierce glare at the young girl standing next to him, and a strange blush suddenly emerged on his face. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi pulled out a small section of drunken dragon incense, which he concocted in Meng Mountains. Soundlessly, he lit the incense and blew a faint aroma into the stone chamber. The bodies of those youths from the Lu clan, who were exercising the white tiger killing technique, swayed, and the circulation of their energies slowed down slowly, eventually coming to a complete stop. Their muscles relaxed completely, and a silly smile emerged on their faces. After that, they fell to the ground and fell into a deep slumber. Carefully, he narrowed his eyes and covered the bright gleam in his pupils. Then, he leaned his body sideways and peeked through the gap between the wisteria. He could see through the window on the side, and through it, he could see the exquisite pavilion that was less than 20 feet in both length and width. It was almost dawn, yet the guest Yu Su was still entertaining was none other than the Prince of Ren, Yan Xianchen. Effortlessly, he cut off a few veins that blocked the flow of energies into the formation, then opened up a small gap. Like a swimming fish, Wu Qi plunged into the general's mansion, poking his head out from the spacious backyard of the mansion. Coincidentally, he came out from a patch of short bushes. There was no one around him, and he could vaguely see the flickering of lamps in a pavilion that was fully covered with wisterias, and vaguely heard a deep, muffled tune of a zither coming from it. Hiding in the wisterias, Wu Qi was struck dumb by what he heard. After a long while, he quietly transformed into a stream of yellow mist and sped away from the place. After taking away the gold spirit pearl, Wu Qi ran his eyes over the dozens of youths from Lu clan, who were lying messily on the ground. They were indeed the descendants of the chief general, as all these youths were wearing storage rings that were rarely seen by ordinary cultivators. Without hesitation, Wu Qi took all the storage rings off their necks. The storage ring was threaded with a thread of heavenly worm silk and hung around his neck. Inside the ring, there were several thousand lower-grade energy stones, several dozens of bottles of various medicinal pills, dozens of mid-grade magical items, and several 100,000 taels of gold and silver, all of which were stuffed into the ring. From the corner of his eyes, he gave a glance at the direction where the light came from. Narrowing his eyes, he stealthily unleashed his enormous divine will, which was so strong that it almost materialized. Inch by inch, it scanned through the pitch-black backyard where no one could be seen. He carefully avoided the pavilion where the light was. His telegnosis sense was like a quietly rising river in a spring night, silently infiltrating the surrounding garden. Soon, he found the fluctuation of spiritual qi under a hill in the back garden. Wu Qi shook his head and sneered as he carefully observed the restrictive spells that enveloped the entire ground of Yu Yi's mansion. There were 9 layers of restrictive formations, and they were even tighter than the restrictive formations under Yan Xianchen's royal residence. However, they could still be broken easily. The attainments of the masters of formation from Great Yan dynasty in the field of formations were really lackluster, and they could not pose any threat to him. Chuckling, Wu Qi plunged into the ground and sped towards the pavilion in the back garden, where the light was still lit. The pavilion was entirely carved out of jade, and the thin railings were all carved with hollowed-out patterns of all kinds of rare plants and flowers. It looked extremely exquisite and magnificent. The pavilion was densely covered with wisterias, preventing any prying eyes from peeping into it. Nearly 100 guards clad in black were guarding cautiously at a place about 1,000 feet away from the pavilion. Yet, they could not stop Wu Qi from plunging into the ground and plunging into a dense clump of blue stamen willow vines outside the pavilion. As too many major incidents had happened in a row, the defense of Ji City had been tightened by a few times. Everywhere under the ground was filled with restrictive spells that could restrict any escape technique, and there were detection and early warning formations everywhere. However, before Wu Qi's innate escape technique of earth element, all these restrictive spells were as good as nothing, and those detection and early warning formations were easily destroyed by him, making it impossible for them to discover his whereabouts. Yu Su answered respectfully, and only then did Yan Xianqin say, "I've placed such a great excuse in front of you, and you've seized the opportunity to kill Wu Qi. I'll promise you both the two things in your heart. Yu Lu will definitely marry Yu Su. Your kidney meridians were damaged in the battlefield, and as long as you cultivate the Great Sun technique, you will be able to be reborn. I've learned this from experience. A few eunuchs in the imperial palace have cultivated the Great Sun technique that I taught them, and didn't they all grow the same thing now?" These youths were sitting with their eyes closed, emanating a murderous aura. Vague images of blades, spears, swords, halberds, and many other weapons could be seen hovering around their bodies. Behind their backs was a small clump of pale white mist, and a vague image of a white tiger could be seen hovering in it. The cultivation levels of these youths varied. Some of the white tiger silhouettes behind them had already condensed a head, while others had only condensed a claw or half a tail. The broken tiger's body looked hazy and did not pose any threat. When the acquired spirit pearls of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth element were gathered, a tremendous transformation immediately took place in Wu Qi's dantian. His energy became more compact, and when it circulated, the energies of 5 elements intertwined with each other, forming a flawless balance. Suddenly, his 5 internal organs were filled with energy essence, and they were brimming with life force, constantly transforming the energies of 5 elements into his meridians and resonating with the 5 acquired spirit pearls. There were even a few hundred great yen cultivators who were also exercising the escape technique of earth element and roaming around underground. However, the speed of these cultivators was like a fish that was dying from lack of oxygen, while Wu Qi was like a pike with the fastest speed in the ocean. These cultivators, whose movements were slow and the circulation of their energy was sluggish, could not detect his movement at all. With light steps, he walked past these patrolling cultivators and came to the underground of General Yu Yi's mansion. "It has saved me a lot of effort." Smiling, Wu Qi sprayed out a mouthful of flame, burning and refining the gold spirit pearl for a while. After that, he opened his mouth and swallowed the pearl, which had shrunk into a tiny speck of light. A thread of energy wrapped around the pearl, slowly bringing it into his dantian. Together with the 4 acquired spirit pearls that Wu Qi had collected earlier, they formed a perfect formation of 5 elements in his dantian. These spirit caves were more than enough for Yu Yi's family members to cultivate in the mansion, and their progress would not be any slower than those of the 13 immortal Dao sects outside the city. Through his divine sense, Wu Qi discovered that right underneath the small hill was the largest spirit cave in Yu Yi's mansion. Furthermore, it was emanating a sharp aura, and vaguely, there was a murderous aura that pierced through the clouds. Using the mystic eyes of universe, Wu Qi gazed at the small hill from afar. He could see a cloud of white mist shooting up to a height of over 100 feet, but it was firmly restrained by a restrictive formation near the top of the hill. A complacent smile appeared on Wu Qi's face. Yu Yi didn't refine this pearl into his prime magical treasure, but used it as the core of the spirit cave, boosting the cultivation speed of his descendants. He nodded his head, shrunk his body back into the soil, and carefully made his way towards the bottom of the small hill. At the darkest moment before dawn, the overly enthusiastic Princess Xiang Lu and the others finally left Duke Yan Li's mansion, rushing to the surroundings to prepare for Wu Qi's forcefully forming the gold dan with a mystic technique. Meanwhile, Wu Qi returned to his own abode, then plunged into the ground at the first moment, transforming into a stream of yellow mist and flying towards Yu Yi's mansion. The acquired spirit pearl that Yu Yi bought with the price of 30 sealed cities must be in that spirit cave. The cultivation technique that Yu Yi was cultivating was a gold element technique, the white tiger killing script, which emphasized on the slaughtering aura of the battlefield the most. All his clan members were cultivating this technique. By using the acquired spirit pearl as the core of the spirit cave, by gathering the earth energies and transforming them into the energies of 5 elements, the spirit cave would be transformed into a pure gold element spirit cave, allowing the cultivation speed of the white tiger killing script to increase by a few times. General Yue was currently leading an army on a crusade against the vassal kingdoms that had colluded with Wei Merchant. Right now, the man who was sitting in the general's mansion was Yue's youngest son, Yu Su. Only Yu Su could be the only one who could play music in the backyard. Yue was a strict man in managing his clan, and as all his other sons and grandsons were out on a crusade, Yu Su was the only one who had the right and the courage to make a scene in the backyard in the middle of the night. In the middle of the formation formed by the 5 spirit pearls, an enormous amount of energies began to interweave and gather, gradually forming into an extremely tiny dot that could not be seen with naked eyes. Wu Qi knew that this tiny dot was the embryonic form of the gold Dan. As long as he cultivated according to the Unity of Sword Energy script, he would be able to quickly form the gold Dan. Noiselessly, Wu Qi squeezed out from the ground and came before the acquired spirit pearl. Lightly pointing his finger at it, he crushed several dozens of runes around it into powder. A large sheet of spirit light exploded, and the pearl was caught in Wu Qi's hand. Happily looking at the acquired spirit pearl, Wu Qi sent his divine sense into it. Sure enough, Yue did not refine this pearl, but simply used it as the core of the spirit cave, specifically used to transform the natural energies. Clad in a casual outfit, he was leaning lazily on a cushion behind the table. His right hand was placed on the thigh of a young girl sitting next to him, stroking it up and down while talking to Yu Su with a smile on his face. Yu Su was sitting on his knees behind the table, putting up a posture of listening attentively. It was hard to tell how respectful and obedient he was. Less than 200 feet below the mountain, a few energy veins were converging here. The dense natural energies had formed into a mist that could be seen with naked eyes, filling a stone chamber that measured over 300 feet in circumference. A silver-white pearl, about the size of a human head, was seen hovering right in the middle of the stone chamber. Several dozens of runes were seen wheeling slowly around it. The natural energies in the surroundings were being absorbed into the pearl, transforming into a sticky and glistening silvery energy that looked like molten silver. Slowly, it spread out from the pearl, rippling layer by layer, and was gradually absorbed by the tens of young men sitting cross-legged under the pearl. He sighed lightly, grabbed the long hair of the young girl and pulled her to his side. While fondling her delicate body, he shook his head and said, "The thunderclap is too fast for us to cover our ears, and the power of the thunderclap is truly frightening." TSK. Initially, everything was peaceful, but when Wu Qi came to Ji City, His Majesty suddenly carried out a great purge. Could it be those few old fogies who are behind this? He. In short, Wu Qi has to die. 2 long tables were placed in the pavilion, and on top of them were dishes, fruits, and fine wine. A thick mattress made of silver fox fur was placed on the ground, and a young girl, who only had a thin veil wrapped around her waist, was seen kneeling in a corner of the table. She was concentrating on playing a zither, which produced a melodious tinkling sound. 2 other young girls, who had the same thin veil wrapped around their waist, were seen kneeling beside the table, serving Yu Su and another young man. There were 81 huge energy veins converging under Ji City, and these 81 main energy veins eventually converged under the Imperial Palace. Therefore, the Imperial Palace of Great Yan Dynasty was the place with the densest natural energy in Ji City. As one of the few chief generals of Great Yan Dynasty, and one of the most powerful men in Great Yan Dynasty's army, there were 3 main energy veins flowing under Yu's mansion, and 18 smaller energy veins converging here, forming a few spirit caves with abundant natural energy. Of course, it was impossible for him to form his gold core in Yu's mansion. He needed the protection of Jing Ku and a few other men, and the help of Princess Zhang Lu and Nie Baihong, using that overbearing and evil mystic technique to form his gold core. Otherwise, if he, an itinerant cultivator of Xiantian realm, somehow managed to form his golden core by himself, it would attract all kinds of strange gazes and intense attention, and that would not bring any benefits to Wu Qi. When Wu Qi arrived, he happened to hear Yan Xianchen talking to Yu Su with a faint smile on his face. "In short, you have to kill Duke of Tianyun 1 month later. I'm getting more and more suspicious that this young man is not some commoner who came from an itinerant cultivator family, but someone sent by Jing Ku and Gao Jianli to stir up trouble in Ji City." Since they are trying to muddy the waters, we will have to kill Wu Qi first. Let's see what other tricks they have up their sleeves. Wu Qi gave the man a careful glance, and his heart immediately thumped. Chapter 197. In the blink of an eye, all 108 thunderbolts were absorbed by Wu Qi. Long Yuan and all the long bow men had already dropped to their knees, kowtowing respectfully to Wu Qi and said, "Great Divine Magus, please forgive us for our offense." "Greetings, Master Great Divine Magus." Almost in the blink of an eye, a huge golden Jin Dan was formed in Long Yuan's dantian. It looked like a Jin Dan was formed as easily as a little kid eating a soybean. A rune that looked 90% similar to the golden rune on his face was flashing and blinking on his Jin Dan. Both runes were communicating with each other from a distance, and a vast amount of energy was surging wantonly in Long Yuan's body like a flood. Long Yuan snorted coldly, opened his mouth, and poured the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup, which had taken Wu Qi a few days and nights to barely succeed in refining, into his mouth. The soup was as viscous as molten iron, yet its temperature was a few times higher than molten iron. The temperature of nearly 10,000 degrees came into contact with Long Yuan's mouth and throat, producing sizzling noises that made even Wu Qi shudder. On the other side, Long Yuan howled in horror and despair, "Oh my God! I've formed the Jin Dan. Heavenly tribulation, thunder tribulation, I'm going to die, I'm going to die." Through his divine sense, Wu Qi could clearly sense that the strength of Long Yuan's arms had skyrocketed by about 5 times, and the strength of his divine sense had also increased by at least 3 times. The natural energies in the surroundings were constantly flowing into his body, following the changing brightness of the golden rune on his face, stimulating the natural energies in his body. Long Yuan snorted. He rolled his eyes and abruptly shrunk his body by about 10 feet, but he was still 90 feet tall. Wearing a strange smile, he looked down at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "Long Yuan, you can only shrink to this size. We, the long bow men, are the descendants of the god. Our bodies can't be reduced to the same size as you lowly people." Shaking his head, Wu Qi said sarcastically, "It didn't cost me much to buy you anyway, so I won't feel any pain killing you." His tone changed abruptly. Wu Qi sneered and said, "But, if you don't listen to me, you'll have to suffer, just like what you did today. If one day you make me feel impatient, you won't even have the chance to suffer. I'll directly destroy your souls." The power of the decoction was like a miniature nuclear bomb exploding in Long Yuan's body. It used the most violent and barbaric method to instantly destroy some of Long Yuan's body tissues and the gene structure in his blood vessels, causing his body and genes to undergo an earth-shattering transformation. Wisps of extremely thin golden threads continuously emerged from Long Yuan's body, forming a complicated, exquisite, round-shaped spell formation on his face. After that, Wu Qi, Wu Qi, Wu Qi, and Emperor Emperor Qi, and Emperor, and of people of Qi of Emperor of Ming I. As for what exactly he was doing, only he himself knew. Longbow men had a great innate talent and potential, which was why they were envied by the heaven and earth. Their Jin Dan tribulation, nascent soul tribulation, and nascent divinity tribulation were extremely powerful, at least 100 times stronger than the thunder tribulation of human cultivators. Less than 1 in 100,000 longbow men could transcend these 3 thunder tribulations and attain the righteous fruit of heaven immortal. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi exerted his will, and the restrictive spell imprinted in these longbow men's nascent divinity was activated. 100 giant Qi men howled and fell to their knees. Their muscles were twitching violently, and their bodies were trembling uncontrollably. Their souls were burning, and their bodies were sweating profusely. Because of the severe pain, their snow-white faces had turned a frightening green color. Holding the small earthen jar, Wu Qi raised his head and looked at Long Yuan as he said coolly, "I know you can shrink your body a little. As a slave, you must have the awareness of being a slave. A slave who spends all his time thinking about making his master look up at him will end up in a miserable state. Now that the restrictive spell was activated, a ball of 9 underworld's flame rose from the soles of his feet and began to burn up their bodies, making these giants wail and wail at the same time. The severe pain from their bodies to their souls was unbearable to these longbow men, who were born rough and barbaric, and nearly died from the pain. But, as their souls were controlled by Wu Qi, if Wu Qi did not allow them to faint, they would not even have the right to do so. Nevertheless, the bodies of longbow men were naturally strong. Although Long Yuan's body had turned red because of the high-temperature medicine, and his eyes nearly popped out from his eye sockets, he still managed to hold his breath and not let out a cry of pain. He held his breath, clenched his fists tightly, and hissing noises kept coming out from the gaps between his teeth. Almost instinctively, he began to exercise the energy circulation technique passed down from the ancestors of longbow men. These longbow men were captured alive by the slave traders of Great Yen Dynasty from an island in the East Sea where longbow men lived. In order to control them, an extremely vicious mind control spell was cast in the depth of their nascent divinity. After they fell into Wu Qi's hands, Wu Qi did not take a liking to the restrictive spell cast on their nascent divinity. Therefore, he used the mystic control spell recorded in the Scroll of Stealing and gave these giants a hard blow. A wicked man must be tortured by another wicked man. After Wu Qi's brutal and bloody threats, these unruly longbow men became much more obedient. Under Wu Qi's order, they rose to their feet one after another. With a sway of their bodies, they shrunk their bodies to about 10 feet using the mystic technique of their bloodline, which made them about the same height as the tallest burly warriors of Great Yen Dynasty. However, their bodies were much more muscular. Sticking out his chest, Wu Qi began to put on an act. After torturing these giants for a full 15 minutes, only then did Wu Qi let go of the restrictive spell and said coldly and mercilessly, "Let me remind you again, you are now my slaves, and by the looks of it, you will be my slaves for the rest of your lives. Be obedient, and I can guarantee you a limitless future. You will be able to eat well, drink well, and use well. If you need beautiful girls, I can even go to Longbow Kingdom and kidnap a batch of beautiful girls from my clan for you." A cold breeze began to blow in the surroundings. Water vapor soared high into the sky, while large dark clouds kept rushing over from all directions. The faint rumbling of thunder made one's eardrums hurt. The speed at which the dark clouds gathered was frighteningly fast, at least 100 times faster than the tribulation clouds of human cultivators. Almost at the moment when the dark clouds appeared, 108 purple thunderbolts, each as thick as a water tank, smashed down towards Long Yuan's head amidst deafening rumbles. Wu Qi shrugged indifferently, sneered and said, "Don't talk nonsense, just drink it." Activating the thunder-stealing spell of 5 elements with full force, Wu Qi absorbed the thunderbolts, which contained the opposing aura of creation and destruction, into his body. While destroying some impurities in his body that could not be purified by his energy and divine sense, he purified his fleshly body and energy, and fundamentally changed the composition of his soul. Wu Qi's face fell. He sneered and said, "I've given you a chance, but you don't want it. A bunch of fools who don't know the difference between life and death." Wu Qi ran his finger across the spirit breeding ring, and with a thought in his mind, a large sheet of bright light shot out from the ring. In the next moment, 100 longbow men, including Chi-Chi, appeared before Wu Qi's face. Including Long Yuan, all the longbow men were staring at Wu Qi with a ferocious look in their eyes. Some of them even cracked their knuckles maliciously, producing loud cracking noises. While cursing Long Yuan and the others, Wu Qi raised both arms high up into the air, with a 5-colored bright light spinning vaguely in his palms. 108 thunderbolts roared and smashed into Wu Qi's palms. Apart from a few stray thunderbolts that fell onto Long Yuan's body, helping him to temper his fleshly body and purifying his energy, all the other thunderbolts were absorbed by Wu Qi. When the powerful thunderbolts entered his body, Wu Qi's body and bones suddenly became brightly lit. Driven by the mystic technique of the thunder-stealing spell, Wu Qi's body quickly went through a tremendous transformation. While exercising the dragon transformation script, he absorbed the thunderbolts at the same time, making his body tougher and stronger. His soul had also absorbed tiny threads of thunderbolts, fusing a thread of the life force of creation into his soul, causing his soul to undergo a magical transformation. Did these big fools mistake him as the great divine magus of Longbow Kingdom? Wu Qi was amused. He knew how to concoct the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup, and he could even help them survive their heavenly tribulations. These were the abilities that only their great divine magus could possess. Noises of wind breaking could be heard coming from all directions, as the guards of Zhanglu Garden were rushing over. The commotion just now was too frightening. Long Yuan took over the earthen jar and gave Wu Qi a deep look. His ferocious eyes were filled with doubt and disbelief. Shaking his head, he said, "Ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup. We've heard of this soup before. It is a divine medicine used to stimulate the bloodline of ancient clans like us. But, how could you know the formula that even the great divine magus of our clan doesn't know? You've been deceived, you've definitely been deceived. How much did you spend to get this formula?" In the end, Zhang Yi was the scapegoat. All the people of Great Yen agreed that apart from Zhang Yi, no one could sneak into Yu Palace and seize the spirit gold pearl. Wu Qi was very satisfied with this conclusion. He felt sorry for old Mr. Zhang Yi, and decided to let him continue to take the blame for him. After all, he would not care about such a small crime, as the crime he had committed was too big. The theft of Yu residents did not cause any commotion in Ji City, as Yu Yi's clan could not afford to lose their face. Apart from a very few core members of Great Yen dynasty, no one knew that the clan of a mighty general, an acquired soul gold pearl, was stolen. Scouting Office, Swallows, and other secret organizations of Great Yen dynasty had searched the surrounding mountains and fields like crazy, yet they could not find any clues. The nearly 100 feet tall Longbow man looked down at Wu Qi with a ferocious gleam in his eyes. After that, he reluctantly cupped his fist toward Wu Qi and cried out in a deep voice, "Long Yuan offers greetings, master. May I know what is the purpose of summoning Long Yuan?" The violent thunderbolts did not only attack Long Yuan, but also, intentionally or unintentionally, brought all the other Longbow men in the vicinity into it. Looking at the huge thunderbolts that filled the sky, Wu Qi could not help but curse angrily. Who did the ancestors of Longbow Kingdom offend? I've never seen such a Jin Dan tribulation. How many wicked things had your ancestors done to deserve 108 Jin Dan thunder tribulations? Wu Qi handed the jar to the first summoned Long Yuan, then said in a cold voice, "This is the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup that I've spent countless efforts concocting for you during the past 7 days. After consuming it, there is a great chance that the bloodline of the ancient heavenly god in your body will be awakened. If you succeed, your cultivation base will skyrocket, and you will become the strongest warriors of Longbow Kingdom." Without any bottleneck or obstacle, his Jin Dan was formed just like that. The formidable innate talent of the Longbow men was fully revealed. 7 days later, in a small hilly area located at the southeast corner of Garden of Zhanglu, the imperial garden of Great Yen dynasty, Wu Qi was panting heavily as he took out a bowl of soup from a huge cauldron in front of him. It was pitch black in color, sticky like glue, and had a layer of golden flame hovering on its surface, emitting a strange fragrance that refreshed one's heart and mind. He poured the nearly 50 kilograms of soup into a small earthen jar, then moved his finger. A beam of bright light shot out from the spirit breeding ring, from which, a tall and burly Longbow man walked out with big strides. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.